Chapter 1273. When Liuyan Ling revealed the truth, the entire deck fell into silence. Gu Han sat there in a daze, not saying a word, while Liuyan Ling lowered her head and sobbed. After who knew how long, Liuyan Ling finally stopped crying. She looked at Gu Han in confusion and asked, "Why don't you find it strange? Why don't you ask me why?" After calming down, Liuyan Ling did find it very strange. When she first learned the shocking truth, she did not recover for a full 3 days. She was immersed in great pain, sorrow, and disbelief. A normal person's first reaction after hearing this news would be to immediately ask her the reason. But this Gu Han did not do anything apart from staring blankly. It was as if he already knew this news. "Could it be that you already knew this?" Liuyan Ling asked with widened eyes. "No. I just learned this from you." Gu Han's expression changed, and he said very stiffly, "Then why don't you ask me the reason?" Liuyan Ling asked again. "I was very confused at first, but after you said that, I suddenly understood." Gu Han sighed. "What did you understand?" Liuyan Ling blinked. "I understand why Kunzu brought the black tortoise into the eternal door of truth. I could not understand why Kunzu did that no matter how hard I tried. Now I understand. If Kunzu did not kick the black tortoise in, I'm afraid your Liuyan family would not exist at all. Or rather, the Liuyan family would still exist, but it would not be your Liuyan family," Gu Han said calmly. "Looks like you've really thought it through." Liuyan Ling let out a long sigh. "That's right. I only found out half a year ago that your cousin, Jiyu Xuanwu, was actually the wife of our old ancestor. Our entire Liuyan family is the descendant of our old ancestor, and you are our old ancestor's old ancestor's old ancestor." Following that, Liuyan Ling told a story that spanned a whole 1,000 years. Ever since Jiyu Xuanwu returned to 1,000 years ago through the eternal door of truth, there were still 8 days before the apocalypse. The first thing Jiyu Xuanwu did when he returned to that era was to seek revenge on Kunzu. After 12 long days of searching, Jiyu Xuanwu actually found Kunzu hiding in the ruins. Just as Jiyu Xuanwu was about to seek revenge on Kunzu, a powerful Yuan Ku attacked Jiyu Xuanwu and Kunzu. Jiyu Xuanwu and that Yuan Ku fought a great battle. Although Jiyu Xuanwu successfully killed his opponent, Jiyu Xuanwu was also heavily injured. In the end, he only recovered under Kunzu's care. Because he was saved by the Sword Ancestor, it was not good for Jiyu Xuanwu to kill the Sword Ancestor again. Thus, Jiyu Xuanwu expressed that he would first save the Sword Ancestor's life and repay him for saving his life before killing him to take revenge. The two of them intertwined and lived together for a long period of time. Later on, Jiyu Xuanwu temporarily left Kunzu for unknown reasons. At that time, Kunzu had already fallen deeply in love with Jiyu Xuanwu. The history after that was more or less the same as the official records. After Kunzu's temporary camp in WH City fell, he brought the remaining survivors and traveled a long distance to Old Beijing City. They lived there for 2 years. Finally, Old Beijing City was conquered by Yuan Ku. Kunzu was appointed in the face of danger and became the leader of humanity, starting a long war. For a long time, Kunzu and Jiyu Xuanwu did not meet again. Later on, when the new Beijing City was built, Jiyu Xuanwu and Qin Shi Huang appeared in front of Kunzu together, wanting to kill Kunzu together with Qin Shi Huang. In the end, Kunzu was invincible and defeated Jiyu Xuanwu and Qin Shi Huang together with his own power. In the end, a hidden flood-level Yuan Ku, who was also Jiyu Xuanwu's enemy, launched a sneak attack on Jiyu Xuanwu, intending to kill her while she was weak. At the critical moment, Kunzu used his own body to block the flood-level Yuan Ku's attack and fell into a coma. His life was in Jiyu Xuanwu's hands. After being saved by Kunzu twice, Jiyu Xuanwu could only look up to the sky and sigh. In the end, she gave up her hatred for Kunzu and turned to save Kunzu with Qin Shi Huang. That was how Kunzu managed to survive. After that, Jiyu Xuanwu, Kunzu, and Qin Shi Huang completely turned enemies into friends. They immediately swore to become brother and sister with different surnames and to never betray each other in this life. After that, the 3 of them went on adventures together. During this time, Kunzu became an Emperor Sword-level sword wielder, becoming the first Emperor Sword-level sword wielder of the human race. Jiyu Xuanwu also mastered his sword skills and became a flood-level mixed-blood human. In the end, Qin Shi buried himself in a coffin due to the backlash from the art of immortality and fell into a deep sleep. After Qin Shi fell into a deep sleep, Kunzu finally proposed to Jiyu Xuanwu on an extremely romantic night. Jiyu Xuanwu finally agreed to Kunzu's proposal and the two of them held a grand wedding. The entire human race celebrated the union of the two of them. It was also because of Kunzu and Jiyu Xuanwu's combined power that they truly conquered the entire world. They beat up the elites of Yuan Ku to the point where they did not dare to show their faces and suppressed the entire world for a while. After that, Jiyu Xuanwu gave birth to Kunzu's only son, fleeting Tianhan. The couple lived in harmony for more than 10 years. However, one day, Jiyu Xuanwu's secret was accidentally exposed. It was only then that the humans found out that Jiyu Xuanwu was actually a mixed-blood human and Yuan Ku. At that time, the humans were not as tolerant towards mixed bloods as they were now. This was because the humans at that time had barely survived the apocalypse and were filled with hatred towards Yuan Ku. They did not allow a mixed-blood human and Yuan Ku to become the wife of the highest human leader. They worked together to force Kunzu to divorce Jiyu Xuanwu and exile fleeting Tianhan and Jiyu Xuanwu's child to marry a human as his wife. Kunzu naturally did not agree to this and strongly objected to it. This gave an opportunity for the ambitious humans who were trying to steal Kunzu's highest leadership position. They joined forces with the other two sword emperors, as well as almost all the immortal sword-level swordbearers, and launched an attack against the sword ancestor. In a fit of rage, the sword ancestor drew his sword and stood upright. With one sword, he fought against 10,000 swords, causing blood and flesh to fly everywhere. The humans were about to experience the most serious civil strife after the Great Apocalypse, and the top forces of the entire human race might be destroyed. For the sake of the overall situation, Jiyu Xuanwu finally left the sword ancestor with fleeting cold sky. Only then did the internal strife calm down under the mediation of a third party. However, the sword ancestor was deeply affected. From then on, he hid in Fleeting Time Mountain and never came out, no longer caring about human affairs. It was also at this time that the Heavenly Court descended from the Dimensional Gate. With 3 desolate-level Yuan Ku, the Heavenly Court was extremely arrogant. With absolute power, they suppressed most of the other Yuan Kus and launched an unprecedented attack on Yangjing City. A total of 5 desolate-level Yuan Kus and 10 flood-level Yuan Kus launched an all-out attack on Yangjing City. Although the humans still had 3 Emperor Sword wielders without Kunzu, they were no match for 5 desolate-level Yuan Kus. Moreover, the dimensional defense system had just been developed at that time, and the energy limit was not as terrifying as it was now. The entire Yangjing City was in a precarious situation, and it looked like it was going to be destroyed. Only then did the humans remember Kunzu. 7 groups of swordbearers broke out of Yangjing City and came to Fleeting Mountain, begging Kunzu to help the humans survive this disaster. However, Kunzu's door was still tightly shut, and he did not care about these people's pleas. The situation had reached its most critical point, and the humans had no other choice. The 2 Emperor Sword wielders who had participated in the attack on Kunzu rushed to Fleeting Mountain late at night and knelt in front of Kunzu's door. Without saying anything, they took out their swords and planned to commit suicide in front of Kunzu's door, using their lives to beg Kunzu to come out of the mountain. Finally, Kunzu chose to forgive them. He walked out of the mountain and returned to Yangjing City with the 2 Emperor Sword wielders. At that moment, Yangjing City was only left with the weak core area. Kunzu and all the other swordbearers had gone through an arduous battle. They had killed the 2 desolation-level Yuan Kus of the Heavenly Court, leaving only the Jade Emperor as the sole survivor. The other 2 desolation-level Yuan Kus, who had come to help, were so scared that they peed their pants. This massive invasion had finally ended with Yuan Ku's defeat. Because the Heavenly Court had lost the 2 desolation-level Yuan Kus, its power had become weaker. It could not suppress the other Yuan Ku's forces, and Yuan Ku itself was in chaos. After this catastrophe, Kunzu's power had deeply shocked all of the humans. There was no one among the humans who did not dare to oppose Kunzu anymore. Kunzu had also found the evil spirits and monsters that had been plotting in the dark and killed them all. Then, he made an agreement with all of the humans. No matter how many years had passed, humans were not allowed to point their swords at their own kind. Humans had to maintain absolute unity in order to survive in this tragic, chaotic world. At the same time, he also made an agreement that humans could not discriminate against humans and Yuan Ku's mixed blood. As long as these mixed blood's hearts were on the human side, humans had to treat them as their own kind. In short, there were many treaties and rules that still existed even now. They had become laws that affected humans for more than 1,000 years. In the years that followed, Kunzu began his journey to find the Black Tortoise and his son, Fleeting Tianhan. No one knew what had happened in the past few years. Even the Fleeting family's records did not have any records. They only knew that although Kunzu had not found the Black Tortoise, he had found his son, Fleeting Tianhan, and brought him back. After that, there was the shocking battle that had led to Kunzu's disappearance. The humans who had lost Kunzu cried out in pain, and the surrounding Yuan Ku's forces began to move again. The remaining Gendis were not strong enough to deal with the Yuan Ku's invasion. Fleeting Tianhan stood up at the most crucial moment. Although he was only an immortal sword-tier swordsman, he displayed a rare display of power that was equivalent to that of a desolation-level Yuan Ku. It was only then that the humans remembered that Fleeting Tianhan actually had a quarter of Yuan Ku's bloodline in his body. He could also use Yuan Ku's method to become strong, and he did not have to be limited to being stronger than the sword mistress. With Fleeting Tianhan's power, the humans finally fought to a draw with the Yuan Ku, and the power of the humans naturally passed into Fleeting Tianhan's hands. Fleeting Tianhan had used various methods to consolidate power, and he had truly become the ruler of the humans. Just like the Qin Emperor, Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, he had firm control over the entire human world. This was also the source of the Fleeting family's power in the human world for 1,000 years. If Kunzu could be said to be the Han Dynasty's Gaozu, then Fleeting Tianhan could be said to be the Han Dynasty's Emperor Gaozu. Fleeting Tianhan was the Han Dynasty's Emperor Wu, who had defeated the Xiongnu and created the Han Dynasty. Everyone thought that Fleeting Tianhan would use his power to vindicate his mother and bring her back. However, to everyone's surprise, Fleeting Tianhan announced that he would completely erase all information about the Jiyu Xuanwu. He even wanted to erase all human memories of the Jiyu Xuanwu, which led to the great cultural destruction. In the end, Fleeting Tianhan succeeded. He successfully erased all information about the Jiyu Xuanwu. Apart from the sword mistresses who retained their memories of the Jiyu Xuanwu, the rest of the humans had completely forgotten about the Jiyu Xuanwu, until today. Of course, the Fleeting family could not erase the records. Instead, they passed it down to their descendants in great detail. In the last part of the solid Black Tortoise's records, when Fleeting Tianhan was about to pass away, the second-generation ancestor of the Fleeting clan had summoned his son and grandson to his bedside and left them with these words. He said that in the future, an unknown time, a human called Guhan would be born. This human was very important to the Fleeting family, and the Fleeting family had to watch over him from afar to ensure that he could live until he reached adulthood. However, they could not interfere with his life. They had to let him grow up freely. Unless his life was threatened, they could not interfere with Guhan's life. However, if Guhan obtained the long-lost Qingpin sword of the Liu family, they had to do everything they could to snatch the Qingpin sword from him and destroy it. They could not allow the sword to remain in this world, or the entire human race would face the threat of extinction. At the same time, he asked the direct descendants of the Lionian family to carry a piece of the sword ancestor's sword soul mark at all times. Once they encountered Gilgamesh, they had to release the sword ancestor's sword soul mark and let the sword ancestor personally kill this old opponent. In the beginning, the Fleeting family firmly remembered Fleeting Tianhan's words. They spread out their tentacles throughout the world in search of that person called Guhan. In the end, after more than 900 years, the Fleeting family found nothing. Guhan never appeared, either. Gradually, the Fleeting family let down their guard and no longer cared about this matter. The tentacles searching for Guhan also stopped. In the end, just as the Fleeting family let down their guard, Guhan was born. It was only when Liuanian Ling went to Yuzhang City's sword pavilion in search of the Yixian sword that she met with Guhan and saved her life with Guhan's help that the fleeting family learned of Guhan's existence. They also learned that the Qingpin sword was in Guhan's hands. Although the fleeting family was careless, they did not dare to go against the will of their ancestors. They immediately sent Takasaka Rina to snatch the Qingpin sword away, which led to the battle in the Mailing mountain range. However, the heavens never followed the will of humans. In the end, not only did Guhan's Qingpin sword not get snatched away, it even absorbed the power of the severed green silk and became the twin sword lady, truly opening the door to invincibility for themselves. There was nothing much to say about what happened next. The fleeting family used the severed green silk as bait to lure Guhan into the fleeting family mountain. After knocking Guhan out, Fleeting Wooden Fish personally examined Guhan's body and discovered that the Qingpin sword had completely fused with Guhan. If they wanted to snatch the sword away, they would definitely harm Guhan's life. This became a difficult choice. In the end, the fleeting family chose to observe Guhan and did their best to satisfy Guhan's requests. At the same time, they sent Takasaka Rina to keep an eye on Guhan. If she discovered anything wrong with Qingpin, she would immediately assassinate Guhan. Chapter 1274. At the same time, Fleeting Wooden Fish even secretly extracted Guhan's blood and compared it to the Fleeting family's DNA in an attempt to find the relationship between Guhan and the Fleeting family. As Guhan's surname was Jiyu, the Fleeting family had always suspected that Guhan was either Jiyu Xuanwu and Kenzu's child, or Jiyu Xuanwu and another man's child. However, no matter who it was, the child would still be related to the Fleeting family by blood. In order to prove this, Fleeting Wooden Fish extracted Guhan's blood. After the DNA test, the Liuanian family came to the conclusion that Jiyu Han was indeed related to the Liuanian family by blood. Moreover, they were the direct descendants of the Liuanian family with a gap of 27 to 28 generations. This discovery made the Liuanian family terrified. They could not understand it. According to the result of the DNA test, Jiyu Han should be a person who lived 1,000 years ago, the same generation as the sword ancestor. Otherwise, how could there be a gap of 27 to 28 generations? However, Guhan had clearly lived in the same era as them. Thinking back to the prophecy that Fleeting Cold had left behind, explaining Guhan's existence, the Fleeting family guessed that Guhan was actually someone from 1,000 years ago. He might even be Jiyu Xuanwu's father, who had come to the future through a tunnel of time. That was why Fleeting Cold could predict Guhan's existence. With this discovery, the Fleeting family's attitude towards Guhan completely changed. Even when Guhan asked for 10,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood, the Fleeting family generously gave it to him. After all, it was a request from their ancestor, and the Fleeting family was not unfilial to that extent. However, from then on, the Fleeting family restricted the contact between Liuanian Ling and Guhan, deeply afraid that they would fall in love with each other. However, the world was unpredictable. In the end, Guhan and Liuanian Ling still entered the Shanhai Pass together. More importantly, Liuanian Ling learned of the Jiyu Xuanwu's existence and reported the news to the Liuanian clan. Only now did the Liuanian family realize that it wasn't Guhan who had transmigrated from 1,000 years ago, but Jiyu Xuanwu who had transmigrated from 1,000 years later. There was no need to say more about what happened after that. When she met Gilgamesh, Liuanian Ling firmly remembered Kenzu's last words and used the sword soul mark. Kenzu also understood his mission the moment he saw Jiyu Xuanwu. In order to be able to meet the person he loved in the past, and at the same time to settle the love and hatred between him and his lover, Kenzu kicked Jiyu Xuanwu into the door of truth and eternity. This shocking cycle of reincarnation had completely become a closed loop. Afterwards, Liuanian Ling fell deeply into Guhan's love, and told Fleeting Wooden Fish that she wanted to be with Guhan even if it meant cutting ties with the Fleeting family. Fleeting Wooden Fish was helpless. His granddaughter had already grown up, and he could no longer hide the truth. As such, he told Liuanian Ling all the Fleeting family's deepest secrets, and left it up to Liuanian Ling to decide her own fate. After learning the truth, Fleeting Time sank into despair for 3 whole days. In the end, he decided to end his relationship with Ji Han that should never have existed. It was precisely because she wanted to understand her relationship with Guhan that Liuyan Ling told the whole story in one breath. There were no loopholes in the story, and it was a perfect match to Guhan's experiences. Guhan knew that Liuyan Ling was not lying to him, and that she was telling the truth. Many of the things that Guhan did not understand in his life were explained in that moment. While the matter between Yi Qing and Artoria was still an unknown secret, the Jiyu Xuanwu and the Liuyan family's secrets were explained. Everything was within reason. In truth, Guhan had already guessed the core storyline of the story before Liuyan Ling revealed everything. Guhan had already guessed that the Jiyu Xuanwu had returned to the past to fall in love with Kunzu, and that the Liuyan family was born. The reason why Kunzu sent the Jiyu Xuanwu into the door of truth and eternity for no reason, and even taught him the art of laws in the skyscraping 12 palaces, was because Kunzu knew that Guhan was his brother-in-law. In other words, Kunzu knew that Guhan was his father-in-law. That was why he worked so hard. The Sword Maiden Online was probably the reason why the Jiyu Xuanwu was able to find Kunzu so easily during the early stages of the apocalypse. The Jiyu Xuanwu did not experience many dungeons in the game, but he would definitely experience the game's initial dungeon. It was also through this initial dungeon that the Jiyu Xuanwu clearly understood everything that Kunzu had experienced in the early stages. Guhan even believed that the role that players played in the early stages was actually the role that the Jiyu Xuanwu had played back then. After helping Kunzu with the synchronization, he was attacked by Yuan Ku Steel Tooth. The Jiyu Xuanwu who had just passed through the door of truth and eternity might have lost a lot of strength due to the time travel. He could not even defeat Steel Tooth, and was heavily injured and unconscious. In the end, he was saved by Kunzu who had completed the synchronization. The reason why Kunzu could directly go to the museum to find the King of Yu, Go Jian Jian, was probably because of the hint given by the Jiyu Xuanwu. Or rather, it was the Jiyu Xuanwu who had commanded him to confirm Kunzu's identity. The fact that Kunzu was able to figure out all of the Sword Maiden's abilities and settings, as well as how to use and strengthen the Sword Maiden in an extremely short period of time, was probably because the Jiyu Xuanwu had brought it from 1,000 years in the future to 1,000 years in the past. Otherwise, based on the humans' critical situation at the time and their lack of understanding of the Sword Maiden, Guhan was worried that the humans might not even understand how to strengthen the Sword Maiden, or whether the Sword Maiden was trustworthy, and would have been wiped out by Yuan Ku. From this point of view, the Jiyu Xuanwu's time travel could be said to have saved the world. It was precisely because of her time travel that the humans grasped the Sword Maiden's combat power in the first place and used the power they could use to the extreme. Without the Jiyu Xuanwu's time travel, it was a huge question whether the era after 1,000 years would still exist. As a result, another closed cycle was formed. Guhan suddenly felt that he did not even have a reason to hate Kunzu. Without the Kunzu's step in front of the door of truth and eternity, perhaps there would not be the existence of humans now. Thinking of this, Jiyu Han's heart suddenly became a lot more comfortable. Of course, there were still many other unanswered secrets, such as where did the Jiyu Xuanwu go after separating from Kunzu, and what happened. Most importantly, how did Guhan and Artoria give birth to the Jiyu Xuanwu? This was still a huge mystery, and Guhan could not find any clues. In addition, Guhan also felt that Takasaka Rina, the past water sword, was not ordinary. Her role was not as simple as Liuyan Ling's story made it out to be. She was not a simple watcher at all. Otherwise, Takasaka Rina would not have become his Sword Maiden, nor would she know so many ancient secrets. Was it because the Liuyan family was still hiding something from him, or was it because of Takasaka Rina's strange background that she had to hide something from the Liuyan clan? Or was there even a force behind Takasaka Rina who used her as a pawn? These were all questions that Guhan needed to find out. Whatever the case, the relationship between Guhan and the Liuyan family was now completely cleared up. This also made things extremely awkward for Guhan and Liuyan Ling. Guhan believed that the Liuyan family did not lie about this, and the DNA test could not be false. Fleeting Tianhan was the son of the Jiyu Xuanwu, which meant that he was Guhan's grandson. Fleeting Tianhan was the second-generation ancestor of the Liuyan family. All the descendants of the Liuyan family were of Fleeting Tianhan's bloodline, and Liuonian Ling was no exception. This meant that Liuonian Ling was actually the 27th generation descendant of the Jiyu Xuanwu. Although Liuonian Ling thought that Guhan and the Jiyu Xuanwu were siblings, and Guhan was her great-great-uncle, Guhan was actually Liuonian Ling's direct ancestor, and Liuonian Ling was Guhan's 28th generation descendant. You already know the truth of the matter. Now you should understand why we can't be together. Liuonian Ling raised her head to stop her tears from flowing. You're my ancestor, and your blood flows in my veins. I'm your descendant. We can't be together. Ji Yuhan didn't say anything. He lowered his head, and no one knew what he was thinking. Haha. Do you feel a lot of pain? A lot of resentment? Liuonian Ling smiled bitterly. These are all my feelings back then. I'll let you have a taste of them. All right, I'm leaving. If you're willing, you can visit the Liuonian family. After all, the people there are your descendants. However, it's impossible for us to meet again. What about in the future? What do you plan to do in the future? Guhan raised his head and asked Liuonian Ling. Me? I'm probably going to find someone to marry. Liuonian Ling smiled bitterly. I'm the only one left of the Liuonian family's direct bloodline. I must inherit the Liuonian family. It just so happens that the noble scholar family has sent someone to propose marriage to my grandfather. I've already agreed. I'll marry him and live the rest of my life well. Is that so? Guhan stood up and looked down at Liuonian Ling, who was only wearing 2 undergarments. What if I don't agree? What if I don't agree to you marrying that person? What right do you have to disagree? Liuonian Ling said hatefully. Didn't you say it just now? I'm your 28th generation ancestor. Since the ancestor said that you can't marry him, do you still dare to disobey the ancestor's orders? Guhan said coldly. Guhan, don't go too far. We're only related by blood, yet you want to order me around. Keep dreaming. Fleeting Cold stomped his foot on the ground, and was about to leave through the void gate when the void gate opened up. However, she hadn't expected Guhan to follow right after Liuonian Ling entered the void gate. They were less than 1,000th of a second apart, so Liuonian Ling didn't even have time to close the void gate. The two of them entered the void together. What are you doing? Why are you still bothering me? Didn't I already tell you everything clearly? It's impossible for us to be together. I'm begging you to let me go, my ancestor Guhan. Liuonian Ling screamed. Maybe I really am your ancestor. Guhan hugged Liuonian Ling's waist and rested his chin on Liuonian Ling's shoulder. He whispered into Liuonian Ling's ear, but you just said that we're only related by blood. I don't have the right to order you around. You've never really treated me as your ancestor, Ling. I just figured it out. After 28 generations of inheritance, the blood in our bodies, or DNA, has thinned to 12684354556. This is no different from 2 ordinary lovers. We can still be together. Guhan murmured. You're crazy. You're a lunatic. You're a pervert. We're obviously direct relatives. How can we be ordinary lovers? Liuonian Ling struggled to say. No, you're wrong. According to the Shenyuan sword, all humans in the world are descendants of Gongsun Shenyuan. Does that mean all humans in the world are committing incest? Guhan hugged Liuonian Ling even tighter. Let go of those unnecessary worries. Whether it's the laws before or after the Great Destruction, all the rules state that we're related by blood within 3 generations. We've already had 28 generations. Why do you still care about these useless things? Liuonian Ling didn't say anything, but her body began to tremble violently. This meant that a drastic change had occurred in her heart. She had been persuaded by Guhan. The psychological defense that she had persevered in her heart for 2 years was breaking down. Guhan understood that this was the most critical moment. He simply turned Liuonian Ling's body around in his arms. Their eyes met. Then, he kissed Liuonian Ling's lips fiercely. Give me your tongue. I'll let you know what love is, Guhan said in a low voice. This time, Guhan didn't put his tongue in like last time. Instead, he waited patiently outside Liuonian Ling's lips, waiting for Liuonian Ling to take the initiative to stick out her tongue. After an unknown amount of time, Liuonian Ling's lips finally began to move. After a long struggle, they slowly opened, and a small moist corner of her mouth sighed slightly. Guhan finally waited for the opportunity he needed, and also waited for the moment when Liunian Ling opened her heart. Guhan bit down and sucked Liunian Ling's lips without hesitation. The two of them finally had a real tongue kiss. This time, Liunian Ling didn't resist. The two of them embraced and kissed in the void. Their lips and tongues intertwined. Their hands groped each other's body. Their naked skin began to turn slightly red and hot, and a warm current intertwined between their bodies. Just as the situation was getting better and better, and the story of bloodline and love that had been entangled for 2 years was about to come to a perfect end, the entire void suddenly became extremely unstable. A series of violent waves completely woke the two of them up. Not good. The void fluctuations are so powerful. Could it be that there's a powerful existence fighting in the void nearby? Liunian Ling was the first to react. She quickly put on some clothes and wiped the saliva off her mouth. She glared fiercely at Guhan, and began to search for the place where the battle took place. Sigh. I've failed at the last step. Guhan's efforts had failed at the last step, but his heart had already relaxed a lot. At the very least, the line of defense in Liunian Ling's heart had been mostly broken by him. With the passage of time, Liunian Ling would definitely completely let go of those unnecessary worries, and the two of them would finally have a happy ending. So, Guhan revealed a smile and chased after Liunian Ling, chasing after the place where the fluctuations were the most violent. Liunian Ling and Guhan finally found the place where the battle took place. Then, they saw an incomparably shocking scene between Guhan and Liunian Ling. On one side of the battle was Longsha Jendi, who had just gone to Mermaid Island, and the pirate sword Immortal. On the other side was a snow-white woman with an ice-cold temperament, like a huge block of ice. Beside this woman was a woman with a pair of black wings and a white bone sword in her hand. This woman in white was actually a sword-bearer. This was actually a civil war between sword-bearers. Chapter 1275. Guhan. Miss Ling. When Longsha Jendi and the pirate sword Immortal saw the appearance of Guhan, their faces immediately revealed expressions of surprise and surprise. Originally, the two of them were already on the verge of despair. Unexpectedly, they could still meet Liunian Ling and Guhan in the void. It was just like seeing two straws in their despair. An immortal sword-grade sword-bearer and a spirit sword-grade sword-bearer? When the female sword-bearer on the opposite saw the appearance of Guhan and Liunian Ling, her brows instantly wrinkled. She looked Guhan and Liunian Ling up and down, and a calculating expression appeared on her face. Obviously, she was calculating the impact of the appearance of Guhan and Liunian Ling on the overall situation of the battle. Who is she? Liunian Ling and Guhan immediately joined up with Longsha Jendi and the pirate sword Immortal. At the same time, they looked vigilantly at the woman on the opposite side and asked, "Look carefully. She is an old figure who appeared in our textbooks since childhood. It's impossible that you don't know her," the pirate sword Immortal said. The personal shield outside his body was flickering, and it was obviously on the verge of breaking. "It's Mingyuan Jendi," Guhan said in a deep voice. After hearing the pirate sword Immortal's words, Guhan immediately remembered. Wasn't this exactly the same as the great traitor of humanity, Mingyuan Jendi, described in his primary school textbooks? Mingyuan Jendi. When Guhan's voice fell, Liunian Ling sucked in a breath of conscience. Unexpectedly, she could actually see this great god with her own eyes. At the same time, her heart was even more puzzled. Hasn't Mingyuan Jendi been hiding in Mingyuan City? Why would they chase after you? Indeed, ever since the Mystic Iris Sword Emperor betrayed the human race and chose to become a bandit, he rebuilt Mystic Iris City in the place where Guilin City used to be. After that, he quietly lived in the city and rarely left it. He also tried his best to avoid conflict with the human race. Ever since the human race failed in their crusade, they rarely provoked the greatest traitor in human history. The number of times Mingyuan Jendi had left Mingyuan City in the past few centuries could be counted on one hand, and the number of times he had attacked human swordbearers was even less. Therefore, Guhan and Liunian Ling simply couldn't understand why Mingyuan Jendi would violate his centuries-old code of conduct and come to attack Longsha Jendi and the pirate sword Immortal. Mingyuan Jendi, Let me introduce you. This is Miss Lionian Ling of the Lionian family. This is our human's new Sea Emperor, His Majesty Guhan. Let's not talk about Miss Ling. As the heir of the Lionian family, she must have the strength to fight an Emperor sword rank at immortal sword rank. And His Majesty Guhan has personally killed 2 flood rank Yuan Ku. Do you still want to fight with us? You're Guhan? Ming Yuan Gendi's cold face was not fixed on Longsha Gendi, but on Guhan in an instant. After carefully looking Guhan up and down, Ming Yuan Gendi said coldly, "Is it you who captured my servant? Is it you who hurt my precious disciple? What's going on here?" Longsha Gendi, the pirate sword immortal, and Lionian Ling looked at Guhan at the same time. They never thought that Guhan had been entangled with Ming Yuan Gendi for a long time. If the servant you're talking about is Yi Wenjun, then I've already killed this disloyal and unjust traitor. As for your disciple, I haven't settled this matter with you yet. How dare you bewitch my friend Defy? Where is she now? Hand her over, Guhan said in the same cold tone. Defy, you're talking about Sister Defy. She has now become Ming Yuan Gendi's disciple. Guhan's words surprised Lionian Ling. She had never thought that her former love rival and good friend Song Defy would actually become Ming Yuan Gendi's disciple. The world was really too chaotic. I don't know what's going on here, but at least from the current signs, it's very likely that she has gone astray. Guhan said very sadly. What a good astray. What a heartless man. It's a waste of my disciple's love for you. Go to hell. Ming Yuan Gendi did not give Guhan a chance to respond at all. In an instant, the white bone sword lady next to her appeared next to Guhan. Be careful. Lionian Ling's body instantly emitted tens of thousands of sword chi. She fully displayed the billion sword skill, trying to repel the white bone sword lady's attack. However, when the two forces intersected, the sword chi shot out by Lionian Ling suddenly began to burn fiercely as if it had been ignited. It blossomed into a pale white flame. In the end, all the sword chi was burned up, and the white bone sword lady's blade had already pierced into Guhan's body. Ah! Guhan let out a scream. A big bloody hole instantly appeared on his left shoulder. Blood with golden threads gushed out of the hole, and instantly, Guhan was bathed in blood. So weak. Ming Yuan Gendi saw that she had easily injured Guhan, and her brows instantly wrinkled as she muttered to herself. It was clear that Ming Yuan Gendi had some understanding of Guhan's famous name. She knew that Guhan's strength was extraordinary. Therefore, she had never thought that her sword would be able to injure Guhan. Her strength was a bit too weak. Guhan. Lionian Ling's sword followed closely behind, and pushed aside the white bone sword lady's sword. At the same time, Longsha Gendi and the pirate sword immortal also rushed over, and firmly guarded Guhan from the left and right, ensuring that Guhan would not be successfully attacked by Ming Yuan Gendi again. Brother Guhan, what's wrong with you today? Where's your personal shield? At the same time, seeing that Guhan's body had been pierced by Ming Yuan Gendi's white bone sword lady without any obstruction, Longsha Gendi asked with incomparable astonishment. Even if it was an ancient sword rank sword wielder, facing the white bone sword lady's attack, the personal shield around their body would at least be able to block it. In this way, they could at least delay for 0 seconds, giving them enough time to rush over to support. My sword lady is not by my side. Guhan said with a bitter smile, which immediately made Longsha Gendi and the pirate sword immortal eat a funny look, and almost fall in the void. I say, Brother Guhan, what the hell are you doing? Coming to such a dangerous place like the void, and you don't even bring along your sword lady. What if you accidentally stay in the void forever? The sword wielder had to rely on the power of the sword lady to break through the void, but the sword lady's return sword could only be carried out in the same space. If the sword wielder was in the void, but the sword lady was in the real world, then the return sword could not be performed. Without the sword lady by his side, even if he was an emperor sword rank sword wielder, he would probably be sealed in the void. Unless another sword wielder found him, he would be trapped in the void until he died. Guhan was also very helpless. When he went to chat with Lionian Ling, Guhan was afraid that the existence of the sword lady would make the two of them feel very awkward, so he first left all his sword ladies in Ocean Emperor Palace, and he went to meet Liuanian Ling alone. He thought that there was no danger in the vicinity of Ocean Emperor Palace, and even if there was danger, his sword lady could immediately return to her sword. However, Liuanian Ling wanted to escape through the void, so Guhan had no choice but to break into the void with Liuanian Ling, which was why such a terrible situation had occurred. Otherwise, with Guhan's ability and the support of the sword lady, how could Guhan not have been able to dodge the white bone sword lady's sword? Mingyuan Gendi's gaze finally moved away from Guhan and turned to Longsha Gendi. Junior, give me what you got, or the four of you won't be able to leave here alive today. By the way, there's also that friend of yours. She escaped 3 years ago, but I didn't expect her to fall into my hands again. 3 years ago, I still had a trace of pity for her and didn't want to kill her. But now, I will kill this woman without hesitation. Longsha Gendi, what the hell is going on? Guhan struggled to stand up while clutching the wound on his body. You used your body to take a hit from my Mingyuan sword, but you're still alive. Mingyuan Gendi's pupils instantly shrank when she saw Guhan stand up. She didn't expect Guhan to be able to stand up from the ground. It turned out that the white bone sword lady was the Mingyuan sword, and the Mingyuan sword's attack had a special characteristic. The power of the Mingyuan sword could spread through the blood to other parts of the body. Therefore, even if the Nether Iris sword managed to make a small cut, the Nether Iris sword's power would still be able to damage every part of the body. In the end, it would cause organ failure and cause death. It might not be able to deal with Yuan Ku, who had a strong physique, but it was extremely effective against humans who were inherently weak. Unless it was an emperor sword wielder with a sovereign bloodline, even an immortal sword wielder would die from heart paralysis within a few seconds if they were stabbed by the Nether Iris sword and did not enter the medical bay in time. Hee. I don't have many things on me, but I do have a lot of sovereign blood. Guhan smiled, took out an sovereign blood capsule, and swallowed it. The wound on his body quickly healed. Of course, this was just a superficial lie. The real reason was that Guhan's physique was already at the meteor stage, Yuan Ku's physique. Therefore, the power of the Mingyuan sword could not kill Guhan. What a waste of heavenly resources. When Mingyuan Gendi saw Guhan consume the sovereign blood, her expression instantly turned ugly. It was as if the sovereign blood had touched her reverse scale. I heard that ever since the Ming Iris Sword Emperor became a traitor to the human race and chose to become a bandit, your blood has turned from a golden emperor's blood to a mercury-like dark blood. Not only can your blood no longer heal any injuries, but it's also poisonous to all living beings. The divine blood that saved lives has turned into a dark blood that takes away lives. Ming Iris Sword Emperor, you must be very unwilling. Liuanian Ling chuckled. Chapter 1276. The Liuanian family is really well informed. You even know my secret. Mingyuan Gendi's face changed several times. Finally, she waved her sleeves and said, I don't want to waste any more time with you. Give me what I want. Otherwise, I'll show you how horrible Gendi, who has been cultivating for 500 years, is. Mingyuan Gendi's cold face showed an extremely impatient expression. At the same time, her words also made Longsha Gendi and the pirate sword immortal look frightened. He looked at Liuanian Ling and Guhan beside him, and finally gritted his teeth and said, If you give Anna back to us, I'll give you what you want. Otherwise, even if the four of us die here, that thing will be lost in the dimensional space forever. Even Kanzu couldn't escape from the dimensional space. You can't get it back. Okay. Mingyuan Gendi nodded, and a black light broke through the void and flew out of her dimensional pocket. Seeing that black light, Guhan's pupils shrank instantly. He recognized that black light. It was the strange black sword that he had used when fighting with Yi Wenjun. After a while, Mingyuan Gendi opened the void, and a figure came in from the void door, holding Liu Anna, who was in a coma, in his arms. When Guhan saw that figure, his pupils instantly froze, because at this time, the person holding Liu Anna was none other than Guhan's good friend, Song Ifei. It was Song Ifei who looked quite calm. Even if Guhan suddenly appeared in front of her, she did not move or show any emotion. She had completely inherited the temperament of Mingyuan Gendi, as if she had become a piece of ice. Master, I've brought you the person you want. Song Ifei said respectfully to Mingyuan Jendi. Young Longsha, I've brought the person you want. Give me what I want, Mingyuan Jendi said. All right. Longsha Jendi gritted his teeth and took out a pure golden transparent crystal from his dimensional pocket. Seeing this crystal, Guhan and Lionian Ling's eyes instantly widened to the size of cowbells. Imperial Zerg! Lionian Ling exclaimed. It turned out that this transparent golden gem was an Emperor-type dimensional crystal. This was the first time in her life that she had seen a real Emperor-type dimensional crystal. This was the second time Guhan had seen an Imperial Zerg. He had even owned one for a short period of time. 3 years ago, Guhan had even obtained a used Emperor crystal from Loki. However, in order to forge Qi Dian, Guhan had used up the Emperor Zerg dimensional crystal. It was no wonder that Mingyuan Jendi would abandon his usual style of doing things and pursue Longsha Jendi and the Pirate Sword Immortal relentlessly. It turned out that there was an Emperor Zerg dimensional crystal that attracted the attention of both sides. Give it to me. Seeing this Emperor Zerg dimensional crystal, even Mingyuan Jendi, who was as cold as ice, could not help but show a fiery expression on his face. He immediately ordered Longsha Jendi. I can give it to you, but you have to give Anna to us first. Longsha Jendi was not stupid. Of course, he knew that whoever handed over their things first was a fool. How about this? Mingyuan Jendi hesitated for a moment. I'll let my disciple hold Anna, and you let your Poseidon hold the Emperor Zerg. Both sides will exchange at the same time. This. Longsha Jendi hesitated for a moment before turning to ask Guhan, Brother Guhan, is this Song Ifei someone who has feelings for you? Yes. Guhan hesitated for a moment before nodding and admitting. Humph. In response to Guhan's admission, Lionian Ling let out a disdainful snort. A strong sour smell could be smelled by everyone around. Then there's no problem. I don't think this Song Ifei will take the opportunity to hurt you, Brother Guhan. I'll leave everything to Brother Guhan. Longsha Jendi sighed and handed the Emperor Zerg to Guhan. This is actually an Emperor Zerg with abundant energy. The moment this Emperor Zerg dimensional crystal was held in Guhan's hand, Guhan felt a powerful and suffocating sword essence. This was definitely an Emperor Zerg that had just been mined and had reached its maximum energy value. At the same time, it was also the most valuable Emperor Zerg. Hurry up. On the other side, Mingyuan Jendi urged while Song Ifei began to walk forward slowly with Anna in his arms. Guhan smiled bitterly and walked over with the Emperor Zerg. After more than a minute, he and Song Ifei finally met in the void after 3 years. Ifei. Long time no see. How have you been for the past 3 years? Guhan could not help but ask with concern when he finally saw Song Ifei face to face. Give it to me. Song Ifei ignored Guhan's concern. His face was still as cold as ice. He did not have any feelings for Guhan at all. It was as if he did not know Guhan at all. Sigh. Guhan let out a long sigh. He thought he was smart, but how could he control this world? Guhan held the Emperor Zerg in his palm and placed his other hand on Anna's waist. He said calmly, I'll count to 123. Let go at the same time. No need. You, Guhan, would not do such a despicable thing. Song Ifei pushed Anna into Guhan's arms with his hand and then took the Emperor Zerg away from Guhan's hand. Master, I got it back. Song Ifei quickly returned to Mingyuan Jendi's side and handed the Emperor Zerg to Mingyuan Jendi. Good. 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 Looking at the precious dimension crystal in his hand, Mingyuan Jendi, who had always been calm, actually said the word good 3 times in a row. Unexpectedly, Mingyuan Jendi, who had obtained the dimension crystal, kept his promise and stopped attacking Longsha Jendi and the others. Instead, he left directly. What a pity. Seeing that such a precious Emperor Zerg was lost in his hands, Longsha Jendi could do nothing but let out a long sigh. In the end, they opened the void door together and returned to reality. Is it already the next morning? When everyone came out of the void, they found that the sun had slowly risen in the east, and a new day had begun. It's not far from Sea Emperor Palace. Why don't you come back to my place and sit down? Guhan invited. Longsha Jendi and the Pirate Sword Immortal nodded, and the four of them returned to see Emperor Palace together. After a short rest, Guhan and Liuyan Ling finally learned from Longsha Jendi what happened after they left Sea Emperor Palace. Yesterday, they went to Mermaid Island under the leadership of the pirate Sword Immortal. It took a lot of effort and almost a fight before they met the 17th princess, or rather, the 17th prince. When the 17th princess saw the pirate Sword Immortal and the others appear with Liu Anna, she instantly understood everything. Without saying anything, she handed the Emperor Zerg to the pirate Sword Immortal. It turned out that the 17th princess, or rather, the 17th prince, did not like the Dragon King of the East Sea at all. He did not want to use his chrysanthemum to serve an old dragon who was old enough to be his great-grandfather. However, in the face of the power of the Dragon King of the Four Seas, Mermaid Island had no right to refuse. So when he entered the bridal chamber, he faced the window, looked at the corals outside, and complained. As a result, Liu Anna happened to pass by the 17th princess and heard her complaints. So, Liu Anna took the initiative to find the 17th princess and said that she had a plan to let the 17th princess return to Mermaid Island. She only hoped that the 17th princess could help her keep something. In the future, when a pirate Sword Immortal or Longsha Jendi came to find her, she could hand that thing over to the pirate Sword Immortal. The 17th princess agreed on the spot, so there was the adultery performance, and the Emperor Zerg fell into the hands of the 17th princess. At the same time, when the two of them shared the same bed, Liu Anna also told the 17th princess about what happened to her. It turned out that when Liu Anna was heading from London to Yuzhang City, she suddenly found that there were strong fluctuations in the void near the sea. At the same time, the sea was constantly trembling violently. Obviously, a battle was going on in the distance. So, Liu Anna quietly approached the battlefield, only to find that one of the overlords of the Sea Clan, the flood-level Yuan Ku, was fighting with a swordbearer. When Liu Anna saw that one side was a swordbearer, she immediately jumped out to help. As a result, after fighting for a while, she found that the swordbearer was actually the traitor of mankind, Mingyuan Jendi. However, probably because Liu Anna had helped her, Mingyuan Jendi was not hostile to Liu Anna at this time. On the contrary, he helped Liu Anna block several attacks from the Dark North Tortoise. Thinking of Mingyuan Jendi's behavior of not hurting human beings after its betrayal, Liu Anna gradually let go of the grudge in her heart and fought side by side with Mingyuan Jendi. In the end, Liu Anna found that her appearance was superfluous because Mingyuan Jendi's strength was extremely terrifying. In less than half an hour, he seriously injured the Dark North Tortoise, the flood-level Yuan Ku, which was famous for its defense, and fell into a state of dying. With or without Liu Anna's help, it did not matter to Mingyuan Jendi. Just when Liu Anna thought that she had succeeded, something happened. The dying Dark North Tortoise suddenly spat out a golden pearl from its mouth. At the same time, it activated all its power, opened a nether storm, and forcibly wrapped Liu Anna in it. When Liu Anna broke free from the nether storm, she found that she was thousands of miles away from the battlefield and appeared near Mermaid Island. It was not until then that Liu Anna realized that the golden pearl that the Dark North Tortoise spat out was the dimension crystal of the Emperor type. According to Liu Anna's guess, Mingyuan Jendi must have learned through some channels that there was an Emperor type hidden in the Dark North Tortoise's body and wanted to get this Emperor type. The Dark North Tortoise knew that it was going to die, but it did not want the Emperor type to fall into the hands of its enemy, so it took the initiative to give the Emperor type to Liu Anna. At the same time, it used the last of its strength to send Liu Anna away, so that Mingyuan Jendi could not find her in a short time. So at this time, there were two choices in front of Liu Anna. She could either wait where she was and give the Emperor type to Mingyuan Jendi. They could either escape with the Emperor Zergs to the human base cities. The original purpose of Liu Anna's trip was to get the Emperor type that appeared in Yuzhang City. Now that there was a dimension crystal that was more precious than the Emperor type, and Mingyuan Jendi was a traitor to human beings, it was self-evident what choice Liu Anna would make. Chapter 1277. After obtaining the Imperial Zerg, Liu Anna immediately attempted to escape back to London. However, Liu Anna never expected that Mingyuan Jendi would catch up with her so quickly. Seeing that she was about to be caught by Mingyuan Jendi, Liu Anna, who happened to run into the East Sea Dragon King's wedding procession, suppressed her disgust for the Sea Clan and forcibly joined the procession. Sure enough, seeing that the Dragon Kings of the Four Seas were there, Mingyuan Zhendi did not dare to make a move because he was afraid of the primordial spiritual treasures in their hands. He could only hide in the dark and observe. Mingyuan Zhendi knew that Liu Anna could not hide in the Dragon Palace of the East Sea Dragon King for a long time. As long as Liu Anna left the East Sea Dragon Palace, it would be time for Mingyuan Zhendi to make a move. Liu Anna was very clear about this, so she handed the Imperial Zerg to the 17th Princess for protection. She opened the void and pretended to be carrying the Imperial Zerg as she began to flee with all her might. The 17th Princess did not know what happened after that, but Guhan and the others could guess that Mingyuan Zhendi must have caught up with Liu Anna in the end. A huge battle broke out between the two sides, and Liu Anna escaped to Yuzhong City through the Sword Lady's self-sacrifice. Mingyuan Zhendi did not dare to make a move on Yuzhong City, so this matter was temporarily put on hold. After hearing the news, Guhan asked Longsha Zhendi and the Pirate Sword Immortal, "Your Majesty Longsha, Pirate Sword Immortal, did you encounter Mingyuan Zhendi's attack as soon as you left Mermaid Island?" "That's right. How did you know? Were you there too?" The Pirate Sword Immortal asked in confusion. "Do I still need to be there?" It's easy to guess that Mingyuan Zhendi must have analyzed the clues after the incident and found out that the Imperial Zerg was either on Mermaid Island or hidden in the East Sea Dragon Palace. Mingyuan Zhendi must have sent people to keep an eye on these two places. He even subdued the dragon ladies from the Dragon Palace and made them his spies to help him find news about the Imperial Zergs. The moment Anna appeared, Mingyuan Zhendi was already waiting for news. "When he found out that you were heading to Mermaid Island, he waited for you to come out," Guhan said indifferently. Longsha Zhendi and the Pirate Sword Immortal helplessly nodded, apparently agreeing with Guhan's analysis and feeling that this was the case. "Dare I ask your Majesty Longsha, what is the current strength of that Mingyuan Zhendi?" Guhan asked Longsha Zhendi. "Very strong." Hearing Guhan's question, Longsha Zhendi's expression instantly became extremely solemn and he said in a heavy tone, "Very strong. The Pirate Sword Immortal and I couldn't fight against her even if we joined forces. We could only run away. She even has a skill that can seal the void. After the Pirate Sword Immortal and I entered the void, we couldn't break the void and escape. If you hadn't come, I'm afraid the Pirate Sword Immortal and I would have died in her hands in a few hours. She's actually so strong." Guhan frowned. When Mingyuan Zhendi defected to the humans, he was just an ordinary Imperial sword wielder. He was at most the same level as the current Longsha Zhendi. However, after a few hundred years, Mingyuan Zhendi had become so strong that he could kill Longsha Zhendi and the Pirate Sword Immortal. To some extent, Mingyuan Zhendi could already be ranked in the top 10 of the Imperial sword wielder ranking. Forget it, it's just an Imperial seed. As long as Anna's matter is solved safely, we'll be satisfied. The Pirate Sword Immortal sighed and then said with a satisfied expression. It seemed that finding Liu Anna had eased a big part of his heart. "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Guhan shook his head and said, "Now that even Mingyuan Zhendi has broken his usual habits, left Mingyuan City, and even attacked humans, I'm afraid there's a deeper secret hidden in this." "What's so strange about this? Is an Imperial seed not worth Mingyuan Zhendi attacking? In order to snatch an Imperial seed, it's natural for him to fight with humans." The Pirate Sword Immortal said with a cold snort. "I think you might have overlooked something." Guhan sighed. "Do you remember 300 years ago, when Tianheng Sword Immortal passed by Mingyuan City with an Imperial seed? Mingyuan Zhendi treated him with respect and did not make things difficult for him. It was also an Imperial seed, so why was Mingyuan Zhendi not interested in it 300 years ago? Why did he make such a big fuss 300 years later, even if he did not hesitate to attack a human Imperial sword wielder? What do you think, Guhan?" Hearing Guhan say this, Longsha Zhendi also felt that something was wrong. Things like Imperial seeds have never been of much use to Yuan Ku. Other than Loki, Yuan Ku has rarely shown interest in Imperial seeds. It can be seen that the dimensional crystal is useless to Yuan Ku. Mingyuan Zhendi has now become Yuan Ku, so I don't think he covets the dimensional crystal. That's why he gave it to Tianheng's sword immortal as a gift. But now that the dimensional crystal is suddenly useful to Mingyuan Zhendi, I think there must be a very important secret hidden in it. That's why Mingyuan Zhendi did such an unusual thing. If this secret is only good for Mingyuan Zhendi, then it's fine. But if it's related to the survival of the entire human race, then handing over the imperial seed to Mingyuan Zhendi this time will be a disaster for future generation. Guhan sighed. Longsha Zhendi and the pirate sword immortal fell silent at the same time. They had obviously realized that Guhan was right. If they handed over the imperial seed so easily this time, if there were any big problems in the future, everything would be troublesome. Fine. If there are any problems now, only Longsha and I can handle it. You two little guys should grow up quickly. If you two can become emperor swords, then the human race will have 3 emperor sword level sword bearers. No, with your disciple, there will be 4 emperor sword level sword bearers. Then, even if Mingyuan Zhendi hatches a big conspiracy, with our strength, we can suppress it. The future will fall on your shoulders. The pirate sword immortal said very irresponsibly. There was no such thing as pushing the blame to others in this world. By the way, Guhan and Ling, why did you two appear in the void? And Guhan didn't bring the sword lady with him. Did something happen to you two? Longsha Zhendi, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. Longsha Zhendi's words hit Guhan and Liuyan Ling's Achilles heel. Liuyan Ling's face suddenly turned red. She lowered her head and couldn't say a word. Instead, Guhan smiled very easily and said, "It's nothing, internal conflicts in the family have been dealt with." Internal conflicts in the family. The pirate sword immortal's eyes were filled with the word gossip. Just as he was about to ask for an explanation, he was pulled away by Longsha Zhendi. The internal conflicts of the Liuyan family, Longsha Zhendi didn't want to have anything to do with it. The Emperor Palace of the Sea was not a place to stay for long. After Guhan handed over the Emperor Palace to the people sent by the Dragon Kings of the 4 Seas, he left with Liuyan Ling, Longsha Zhendi, and the pirate sword immortal on the same day. Fearing that Zhendi would attack them on the way, the 4 of them and Wen Maiyun, Guhan's subordinates, took a dragon carriage together. When they saw the land, it was time to say goodbye. Your Majesty, Miss Ling, we are going back to London. Goodbye. After a brief farewell to the pirate sword immortal, Longsha Zhendi left with Liu Anna in a hurry. They still wanted to improve Liu Anna's IQ, so they had to go back to London immediately. Goodbye, the 2 of us. Liuyan Ling rolled her eyes at Guhan and said bluntly, "You go back to your Yuzhong city, and I go back to my Yangjing city." "No. The 2 of us have to travel together," Ji Yuhan said with a smile. "What do you want to do? Don't you think you have disturbed me enough?" Liuyan Ling said with great dissatisfaction. "No." Guhan shook his head and patted his dimensional pocket at the same time. "I still have something very important to give to Yangjing city." "What important thing can you have?" Liuyan Ling said disdainfully. "This thing of mine is very important," Guhan said solemnly. "As long as I show it to them, all the immortal sword holders in Yangjing city will rush to kneel in front of me." "Hey! Don't go too far," Liuyan Ling said with a look of disgust. "Then let's make a bet. If I can really make all the immortal sword holders in Yangjing city kneel in front of me and thank me, you will marry me and become my woman. If I can't do that, I will never appear in front of you again and completely give up on my grudge with your Liuyan family. I promise to stay away from your Liuyan family for the rest of my life. How about it?" "What do you mean my Liuyan family? What grudges with the Liuyan family? Isn't it our Liuyan family? Do you still have the face to talk about grudges with your descendants?" Fleeting Time Lin said with a mischievous smile. "So are you going to bet or not?" Guhan ignored Liuyan Ling's mockery and went straight to the point. "Bet? Why not?" Liuyan Ling snorted. "This is a bet you want to make with me. If you lose, I hope you can fulfill your promise and stop bothering me." When Liuyan Ling said that, Guhan and Liuyan Ling heaved a sigh of relief. Liuyan Ling had fought alongside Guhan before, so she knew Guhan's abilities very well. How could Liuonian Ling not know how terrifying Guhan's abilities were? Since he was confident in making this bet with her, then there was an 80 to 90% chance that he would win. So rather than saying that Liuonian Ling was making a bet with Guhan, it was more like she was finding an excuse to agree to Guhan's bet. Hey, Chijian, looks like your most troublesome love rival has appeared. The celestial extinguishing sword nudged Chijian's arm playfully beside Guhan. Chijian lowered its head. No one knew what it was thinking. Chapter 1278. The dragon carriage flew all the way to Yangjing City's city gate, and under the gazes of the people around it, it slowly descended. After dropping Guhan and the others on the ground, it quickly left. Although the dragon carriage was faster and safer than a hovercraft, it had to be set off from the sea, which was extremely inconvenient to use. Therefore, Guhan did not have the intention to continue using the dragon carriage, and directly sent it back. Your Majesty Poseidon, Miss Ling. Thanks to the live broadcast service, when Guhan and Liuonian Ling entered Yangjing City, several guards at the city gate immediately recognized Guhan and Liuonian Ling, and greeted them respectfully. Let's go. Guhan smiled. He had already felt that his identity had become completely different among humans. Before he became Poseidon, how many people in Yangjing City could recognize him? But now, even the gatekeeper at the city gate could recognize him immediately. This meant that Ji Han had completely made a name for himself among the humans. He had taken a solid step towards ascending to the throne and leading the entire human society in the future. You're very proud of yourself. Liuonian Ling sensed the change in Guhan's mood, and said somewhat mischievously. Yes. Isn't it worth being proud of? Guhan still admitted very honestly, then took out his hovercraft from his dimensional pocket, and clapped his hands at Liuonian Ling. Get in. What are you doing in Yangjing City? Sitting in Guhan's car, Liuonian Ling asked, puzzled. I've said it before, I'm here to deliver something, Guhan said with a smile. As for what it is, I can't tell you now. When we reach the core area of Yangjing City, you'll know. What are you doing? So mysterious. I can't be bothered with you, Liuonian Ling said unwillingly. At the same time, in the core area of London, the great Sun Sword Immortal who was working received a report from the city gate. What? That Sea Emperor and Miss Ling have come to Yangjing City? Hearing the report from the city gates, the great Sun Sword Immortal was confused. Liuonian Ling's return to Yangjing City was easy to explain. After all, Yangjing City could be considered a base of the Liuonian clan. But why did Guhan, the newly appointed Sea Emperor, come to Yangjing City as well? Could it be that he was here to show off? Ask the transportation department to keep an eye on Poseidon's whereabouts. Inform me when they arrive at the Sword Committee. I want to welcome them personally. As the chairman of Yangjing City's Sword Committee, the great Sun Sword Immortal was not someone who would easily welcome others. Unless it was Longsha Jendi or fleeting wooden fish, the great Sun Sword Immortal would not take the initiative to welcome anyone. However, Ji Han's identity as the Ocean Emperor was special. Moreover, the fact that he had a close relationship with the Shenyuan sword had been exposed. In addition to his disciple Lu Shihua, as long as the two of them did not die on the way, they would definitely become the two Emperor Sword-level swordbearers in the future. Thinking of this, the great Sun Sword Immortal did not dare to delay. He decided to welcome them personally, giving these two future Emperor Sword-level sword holders some face. Just as the great Sun Sword Immortal was calculating how long it would take for Guhan and the others to arrive at the Sword Committee, the great Sun Sword Immortal's personal terminal suddenly beeped. Great Sun Sword Immortal did not understand what was happening. Countless beeping sounds rang through his personal terminal at the same time. This meant that there were at least 10 or more communications trying to contact the great Sun Sword Immortal at the same time. What the hell? The great Sun Sword Immortal instinctively felt that something was wrong. He clicked on his personal terminal, and all the names that were being called were displayed. Chu Shen's name was at the top, especially eye-catching. What's going on? Does the great Sun Sword Immortal still think that I'm that Guhan from before? Guhan and Liuonian Ling arrived at the entrance of the Sword Committee, and found that the great Sun Sword Immortal was not there to welcome them as he had expected. This made Guhan slightly angry. In his calculations, the great Sun Sword Immortal should not be so ignorant as to neglect 2 future Emperor Sword-level sword holders. However, this atmosphere only lasted for less than a second. Very quickly, Guhan realized that something was wrong. The entire hall of the Sword Committee was empty. Only a few staff members at the front desk were anxiously trying to explain something to the other side of the call. "Don't worry, everything is being investigated. I will inform you immediately if there are any new development. Please don't be agitated. We are also investigating the reason, but the Sword Committee guarantees that we will do our best to ensure everyone's safe return. Apologies, we are not accepting media interviews at the moment." Ji Han deliberately listened and found that these service staff were saying something similar. It seemed that something major had happened in Yangjing City, which was why such a situation would occur. However, no matter how major the incident in Yangjing City was, it could not have caused the Sword Committee to be empty. Something unexpected must have happened here. "Guhan, what happened?" Liuonian Ling, who had entered the Sword Committee after them, also realized that something was wrong and asked Guhan urgently. "I don't know either, but I'll know if I ask." Guhan quickly walked to the front desk and asked a female staff member who was on the phone. "What happened here? Did Yuan Ku come?" "Hello, we don't know anything at the moment. Please wait patiently for the official news from Yangjing City." The female staff member did not even raise her head as she replied in an extremely standard and formulaic manner. "Don't use such words to fool me. Tell me quickly, what happened?" Guhan slammed the table hard, startling the female staff member. He raised his head and shouted, "Security! Security! There's a madman here, get him out of here." However, the female staff member seemed to have forgotten that all the security guards had left the Sword Committee to maintain law and order in various places. "You, answer my question." Guhan reached out in a flash and grabbed the female staff member's chin, forcing her to look at his face. It was only then that the female staff member recognized Guhan's identity and cried out in horror, "Poseidon! Your Majesty Poseidon, since you know who I am, don't try to fool me with those words anymore. Tell me, what happened here?" Guhan asked again. There's an order from above. I can't tell anyone." Although her chin was grabbed by Guhan, the female staff member still followed her professional ethics and was unwilling to tell the truth. "You don't dare to tell His Majesty Poseidon, but you can tell me." Liuonian Ling also stood up and said to the female staff member, "Miss Ling." Seeing Liuonian Ling appear, the female staff member was instantly overjoyed. After a short moment of hesitation, she decisively said something that both Guhan and Liuonian Ling found hard to believe. "What's the situation now? How bad is it?" In the meeting room of the Sword Committee, a few people in white robes sat uneasily on the chairs. The great Sun Sword Immortal used an angry tone to interrogate these arrogant scientists. According to preliminary statistics, 24 million people in Yangjing City are trapped and unable to escape. A scientist in a white robe said in a trembling voice. "Sword bearers. How many sword bearers are there?" Hearing the number 24 million, the great Sun Sword Immortal felt like he was going to go crazy. "I don't know about the other cities, but there should be about 22,545 sword bearers trapped in Yangjing City." This old scientist was about to cry. More than 20,000 people. Why are there more than 20,000 sword bearers trapped there? What are they doing in the game instead of fighting outside? The great Sun Sword Immortal slammed the table angrily. Because of Poseidon's ascension to the throne, he opened a celebratory instance. So most of the sword bearers in Yangjing City have gone in to do quests. The scientist said with a sad face. "What about the other cities? What about the other cities? What about Yuzhong City?" A voice outside the door asked anxiously. "Yes. The other cities. Yuzhong City. Wait, who's speaking for me? Is this a place you can barge in?" Only then did the great Sun Sword Immortal realize that something was wrong. He immediately shouted angrily outside the door. "It's me. I'm sorry. Great Sun Sword Immortal, the situation is urgent, and I have no choice but to resort to extreme measures." Ji Han kicked open the door of the conference room and stormed in. Seeing that it was Guhan, the great sun sword immortal could do nothing but glare at Guhan. How could he forget that this great god was about to arrive? Moreover, in terms of pure strength, he, the great sun sword immortal, was no match for this spiritual sword-bearer. Other than admitting that he was unlucky, there was nothing he could do to Guhan. He could only silently accept his appearance. You. Calm down, use your utmost rationality and tell me, what's the situation in the other cities? Compared to the anxiousness at the door, Guhan calmed down after entering the conference room. His calmness and composure infected the scientists around him. They regained some of their composure, but their voices were still trembling. This is the response of 8 base cities at the same time. I'm not sure about the specific situation in Yuzhang City, but I'm sure that at least tens of millions of people are trapped in the game, including at least 5,000 swordbearers. The situation in the other cities is roughly the same. What the hell? Guhan slammed his palm on the table, and the table broke into pieces in an instant. What had happened to countless opponents of Sword Maiden Online had actually happened. Sword Maiden Online had actually trapped the consciousness of countless people in the game, even the swordbearers were no exception. The sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. Chapter 1279. Your Majesty, Miss Ling, what follows is a secret of Yangjing City. Other than the staff of the Research Institute, there are less than 10 people in Yangjing City who know this secret. I hope you won't leak it out. At the entrance of a large department store, the Great Sun Sword Immortal said solemnly to Guhan and Lionian Ling of course. Guhan nodded and walked into the large department store with the Great Sun Sword Immortal. Unlike the usual crowded department store, the flow of people in the entire department store had decreased by at least 3/4. The remaining people had panicked expressions on their faces. At the same time, many shops were closing, and most of the shops were already closed. Obviously, the major change from Sword Maiden Online had thrown the people of Yangjing City into a state of panic. At this time, Guhan and the Great Sun Sword Immortal, who wore hats and masks, didn't attract anyone's attention. Under the guidance of the Great Sun Sword Immortal, the two walked to the staff area of the department store and stopped in front of an elevator that was specially used by the staff. This is the elevator to the Bat Research Institute. Looking at the rusty elevator in front of him that was full of bumps and bruises, Ji Yuhan said in disbelief. Who would have thought that the path to the most important research institute in Yangjing City would be hidden in a department store? The Great Sun Sword Immortal forced a smile and opened the elevator door. This was different from the push-button elevators of 1,000 years ago. Because most buildings had more than 200 or 300 floors, if there was still one button per floor, the entire elevator wouldn't be enough even if it was filled with buttons. Therefore, the elevator became a voice command elevator. As long as the smart computer said the desired floor, the elevator would go there automatically. I want to go. The Great Sun Sword Immortal was about to speak when Guhan suddenly poked the back of the Great Sun Sword Immortal's waist, forcibly cutting off the Great Sun Sword Immortal's words. Your Majesty, what are you doing? The Great Sun Sword Immortal asked unhappily. Be careful. If Bat revolts, I'm afraid the other smart devices in the base city are also in danger of revolting. Does this elevator have a manual control system? I suggest that it's best to use manual control, Ji Yuhan said. Don't worry. The Research Institute had considered this problem when it was first designed. Therefore, the entire Research Institute system is independent and not controlled by BAT. Even the power source is not electricity. You can rest assured. After the Great Sun Sword Immortal finished speaking, he faced the control system of the elevator and began to sing. Find a friend, find a friend. Find a good friend. They saluted and shook hands. You are my good friend. Cough cough. This is the activation code for the elevator, and it's also a children's song that was lost after the cultural apocalypse. Only by singing this song accurately can we go to the Underground Research Institute, the Great Sun Sword Immortal explained awkwardly. The next second after his beautiful song ended, the entire elevator began to descend rapidly again, as if they were sitting in a maglev flying car. After descending for who knew how many meters, the elevator finally stopped. After the elevator doors opened, Guhan saw a rather retro world. It was different from the sci-fi feeling of the research institute that Guhan had imagined. The entire research institute was actually filled with a steampunk style. Countless steam pipes covered the entire research institute, and from time to time, steam could be seen coming out of the pipes. Don't you feel that it's very strange? Out of your imagination? Seeing Guhan and Liuonian Ling's confused expressions, the great Sun Sword Immortal's face flashed with pride. This research institute was built together with Bat. We considered the possibility of Bat betraying humanity when we were building it. Therefore, to ensure the absolute safety of this prison that Bat is trapped in, other than Bat's mainframe system which uses electricity, the main power facilities in the research institute all rely on steam. This way, even if Bat rebelled, they would not be able to affect or control the research institute, and the humans in the research institute would not be in any danger. This is indeed a foolproof plan. Seeing the research institute full of steam, Guhan couldn't help but nod. The worries of the human ancestors were not without reason. After all, the research institute was the first line of defense to control Bat. If Bat really wanted to betray humanity, they would first have to control the entire research institute. If the research institute still used electrified control layout, and simply didn't connect to Bat's network, then there might still be loopholes. God knows if Bat would secretly brainwash some humans to help Bat connect to the research institute's control system. Or Bat could, through their own research, create a way to control the research institute's electrical circuits without a network cable. Once the control of the entire research institute was really controlled by Bat, then Bat only needed to shut down all the doors of the research institute, and at the same time, cut off the power supply of the research institute, and the entire research institute would no longer be controlled by humans. Therefore, the steam system, which was completely different from the electrical system, became the best choice for humans. Humans built a set of complex steam and gear drives to form and control the entire research institute's power system. At the same time, all the control systems abandoned computer automation, and all used the most primitive buttons and handles to control the research institute. This way, unless Bat created its own entity, it would not be able to control the research institute. Great Sun Sword Immortal. Great Sun Sword Immortal. All the researchers in the research institute looked like they were in a hurry, and only stopped to bow when they saw Great Sun Sword Immortal. But they didn't have any reaction to Guhan, who was behind Great Sun Sword Immortal. Ahem. These researchers rarely care about outside developments, so many of them don't know you, Your Majesty. Great Sun Sword Immortal was afraid that Guhan would be dissatisfied, so he quickly explained. No worries. I just want to see the director of this research institute as soon as possible, and understand what happened. Guhan said with a frown. Soon. I've already told him that we're here, he should be waiting for us in the main control room. As soon as Great Sun Sword Immortal's voice fell, the three walked to a door with the sign of the main control room. The three pushed the door open, and Guhan and Liuonian Ling's eyes were no longer filled with steam. They saw rows and rows of computer screens, and countless electronic devices. This was where the main Bat system was buried, and the only room in the research institute with a computer. Chu Xian. What's the situation now? As soon as they entered the main control room, Great Sun Sword Immortal went straight to a man in a suit, who was looking up all sorts of information in front of the main monitor. This name seems familiar. Hearing Great Sun Sword Immortal call out the name, Guhan said thoughtfully. He remembered that Tomono Kakaze had mentioned Chu Xian's name several times. It could be seen that Chu Xian was someone that Tomono Kakaze was extremely afraid of, as if he held Tomono Kakaze's life in his hands. At the mention of Tomono Kakaze, Guhan was probably worried again. Ever since he knew that Sword Maiden Online was in trouble, he tried to contact Tomono Kakaze at the first instance, but all his efforts were in vain. Tomono Kakaze's communication was always busy. In fact, he didn't even need to think to know that Tomono Kakaze was the core AI of Sword Maiden Online, and also an extended personality of Bat. If something happened to Bat, Tomono Kakaze couldn't escape responsibility. The situation isn't too bad, but it's not too good either. At least the lives of those trapped in the game can still be guaranteed. The man called Chu Xian replied. But in the process of replying, Chu Xian didn't raise his head at all, nor did he look at Great Sun Sword Immortal. His attitude was extremely bad and disrespectful, but Great Sun Sword Immortal seemed to be used to his attitude, and didn't show any displeasure on his face. How can you be so sure that the lives of the players in the game aren't in danger? I remember the helmet can only read a human's brainwaves. It can't affect the human brain. How can this game trap a human's consciousness? Ji Yuhan walked to Xian's side and asked quickly. That's right. Stranger. Hearing Guhan's voice, Chu Xian finally didn't keep his head down, and raised his head for the first time. He squinted his eyes at Guhan, then said, Military Governor? Poseidon? Guhan? That's right, it's me. Guhan admitted directly. Nice to meet you. Chu Xian extended a hand to Guhan. Nice to meet you. Guhan immediately shook Xian's hand, as if they had become two very familiar friends. I say, Chu Xian, I don't think we've ever shaken hands before. Even if this is Poseidon, since when did you, Chu Xian, become so attached to power? Seeing this scene, Great Sun Sword Immortal said half jokingly and half discontentedly. I shook hands with Guhan not because he is Poseidon, but because he is military governor. Xian retracted his hand and said indifferently, I once tried to solve the initial dungeon, but I failed. I admire him for this. If that's the case, then please answer my question, Director Chu. Guhan didn't want to waste any time and went straight to the point. Actually, Ji Yuhan's two questions can be treated as one. Xian pressed a button on the controller and a 3D hologram of the virtual reality helmet appeared. I have a friend called Kirito. He experienced such an interesting story before. He was also trapped by the game system and couldn't escape, just like this situation. Xian said with a smile. Did Sword Maiden Online have an accident in the past? Hearing Xian's words, Ji Yuhan was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately became suspicious of Xian's identity. Ji Yuhan immediately held the Qi Dian sword and activated its basic skill. As expected, he saw an extremely hidden dimensional node on Xian's body. This Xian was actually Yuan Ku. Chapter 1280. Looks like you've discovered my identity, Guhan. What Guhan didn't expect was that Xian pointed this out a few seconds after Guhan discovered the dimension node on Xian. Why do you say that? Guhan asked curiously. I'm quite sensitive to the look in people's eyes. I can sense a person's thoughts from the slightest change in the way they look at me. Ji Yuhan, the way you looked at me just now was filled with vigilance and curiosity. I'm afraid the only thing that could pique your curiosity is my somewhat awkward identity as a bandit. Xian actually took the initiative to reveal the fact that he was a bandit with just one sentence. Your Majesty Poseidon actually saw through it. Great Sun Sword Immortal asked Guhan in surprise. He didn't expect Guhan to be able to see through Xian's identity in such a short time. Missling, did you tell His Majesty Poseidon? Great Sun Sword Immortal asked Liuanian Ling behind him. No. Liuanian Ling shook her head. I never told him these things. He saw through it himself. That's strange. Mr. Xian's body has a special shielding device we designed. Only the most professional equipment can discover Mr. Xian's identity. How did you see through it, Guhan? Great Sun Sword Immortal was even more confused after hearing Liuanian Ling's denial. Great Sun Sword Immortal, please forgive me for being direct. Is it really safe to put a Yuan Ku in such an important position? Guhan didn't hide anything from Great Sun Sword Immortal. You don't have to worry about Uncle Xian. Great Sun Sword Immortal didn't say anything. Liuanian Ling took the initiative to say, Uncle Xian came to this world 1,000 years ago. He has a deep friendship with our ancestor. If Mr. Xian didn't act as the strategist for our ancestor, humanity would have perished in Yuan Ku's hands 1,000 years ago. If Mr. Xian really has evil intentions towards humanity, then he doesn't have to do anything. He just has to leave our ancestor and humanity will perish. Liuanian Ling said. I see. Please forgive me. Guhan immediately bowed to Xian after hearing Liuanian Ling's words. No wonder, according to the historical performance, the Sword Ancestors' fleeting year calendar was not outstanding in terms of intelligence except for its extremely high combat power. But he was able to defeat Yuan Ku time and time again. There were even many battles like the Battle of Red Cliffs where the weak won against the strong. At that time, Guhan suspected that Kunzu had an intelligent strategist. But he couldn't find any trace of this strategist. Now it seemed that the strategist was Shen. It was probably because of Shen's identity as Yuan Ku that he purposely hid himself in history and didn't want to show his face in public. It's fine. Guhan, your thinking is normal. There's nothing to apologize for. Let me talk about the problem just now. Shen paused. Because the same thing happened to my friend Kirito, I designed a complete plan to ensure that the human consciousness won't be trapped in the game. As long as the helmet is removed, the human will return to reality. In order to achieve this goal, I didn't choose the more convenient and simple neural connection method to enter the virtual mode. The helmet won't come into direct contact with the human's nervous system. It only receives the human's brain waves to calculate and evolve human behavior. At the same time, it simulates the sensory response of the game by contacting some of the sensory nerves. Therefore, such a helmet and game should be very safe. Even if the bat wanted to kill humans through the helmet, it would at most destroy the sensory nerves it came into contact with. With the current medical technology, repairing some damaged sensory nerves is not a big problem at all. It can be treated very quickly and effectively. Shen's words made Guhan even more confused. In fact, Guhan also disassembled the game helmet. After analyzing the equipment in the game, Guhan came to the same conclusion as Shen. The helmet itself didn't have the ability to kill, nor did it have the problem of cutting off the human's brain nerves. From this point of view, it was almost impossible for humans to be hijacked by the game. They could forcibly stop the game by taking away the helmet. This was also why humans were so confident in Sword Maiden Online. But the fact was that the players in the game had been hijacked. Up until now, Guhan still hadn't figured out how the players were hijacked. This was the most important question he came to ask Shen. It's actually my negligence. I always thought that as long as the physical safety was guaranteed, I could guarantee the safety of the players. I neglected the soul. I never thought that this game could be a temporary transfer station for the soul. At this point, shock finally appeared on Shen's calm face. This was obviously far beyond Shen's expectations. To facilitate the experiment of matching humans and sword maidens, Bat's host computer added a biological brain. It's a brain made entirely of human brain cells. It's equivalent to hundreds of millions of times the computing power of a human brain. It's also because of this artificial brain that the fragments of consciousness of sword maidens can be stored in the brain. Otherwise, no matter how advanced a mechanical or electronic processor is, it can't contain fragments of consciousness. In the beginning, when creating the brain, I only considered the problem of fragments of sword maiden's consciousness. I didn't consider the fact that the brain can also contain human souls. What's more frightening is that the brain will unconsciously collect fragments of human souls. This isn't an active consciousness, but an instinctive consciousness of the brain. As a brain, it's born to desire a soul. This is a biological instinct that no one can change. The soul is a very strange thing. Until now, humans haven't fully understood the soul. But we discovered that human souls can actually travel at the speed of light through the quantum network. In the process of traveling through the quantum network, the soul will unconsciously be worn out. These worn-out soul fragments will all be absorbed by the biological brain. If this goes on for a long time, the players who log into the game for a long period of time will either develop a nervous breakdown or become a vegetable that has lost its soul. Unless an extremely precious soul solution is used to strengthen the patient's soul, death is the only way out. But by the time I realized this, it was already too late. The entire game has become the most important part of our society. The number of sword bearers doubled due to the appearance of sword maidens online. Although I reported the severity of the matter to the sword committee, they still decided to continue the game after a long period of evaluation. They couldn't bear to let go of double the number of sword bearers. So I couldn't shut down Sword Maidens Online at that time. Both Great Sun Sword Immortal and Lionian Ling looked ashamed at Shen's words. It wasn't hard to imagine that among the people who participated in this important meeting, The chairman of the Yangjing Sword Committee and the leader of the Liunyan family were among them. It was them who decided to continue the game for their own benefit. Even though the Sword Committee will allow the game to continue, I'm still worried. I don't think we can let this brain absorb the players' souls without limit. Otherwise, no one can predict what kind of personality will be born after the brain absorbs enough souls. So you decided that instead of letting the brain give birth to an uncontrollable soul with an unknown personality, why not put a ready-made human soul in it? Guhan continued without waiting for Shen to speak. Guhan, you're really smart. This was the only solution I could think of at that time. The soul born from the brain sacrificing countless soul fragments will be chaotic and disorderly. It might even go crazy. This is a terrifying result for the game. Instead of letting the brain give birth to an uncontrollable soul, it's better to let a soul with a complete personality control the brain first. Right, Guhan, guess whose soul I put in the end? Shen suddenly asked Guhan. To become the soul of the brain, one must be extremely loyal to humanity. One must be willing to dedicate their life to humanity. At the same time, one must be able to endure thousands of years of loneliness and not break down because of loneliness. More importantly, this soul must be able to make all humans feel at ease. Guhan looked at Liuyan Ling behind him, then at the sword in his hand. He let out a long sigh. To be able to make all humans feel at ease, I'm afraid there's no one else other than Kunzu. Amazing. Shen looked deeply at Guhan. He didn't expect Guhan to be able to guess this. He explained after a moment of silence, that's right. There was no better choice than Kunzu's soul. Coincidentally, the Liuyan family had many of Kunzu's sword scar soul marks, so I asked for one from the Liuyan family. I let Kunzu's sword scar soul mark enter the brain and become its master. However, Kunzu's sword scar soul mark isn't a real soul. It's only a soul fragment at most. So, the brain is still absorbing the soul fragments of the players. I'm not worried about that, because as long as Kunzu is around, any soul can be killed on the spot. In the end, the soul was finally born. But unexpectedly, the soul that was born wasn't an evil and chaotic soul. Instead, it was a pitiful girl. She was so weak and cute that even a merciless person like me couldn't bear to kill her. At this point, Ji-Yuhan also guessed that the soul that was born must be Tomina Sasuke's. Chapter 1281. After Tomono Kakaze's personality was born, we conducted the strictest observation on Tomono Kakaze's personality. At the same time, we hired the best trainer to conduct personality training, turning her into a heartless and harmless lowly personality. Shen suddenly looked at Ji-Yuhan and revealed a strange smile. The so-called trainer is the kind that can train a woman who hates you into a kitten that obeys your every whim. If anything goes wrong in your relationship, Guhan, I have a very good trainer for you. After all, they are professionals. Uncle Shen. Before Ji-Yuhan could react, Fleeting Time's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and shouted, Uncle Shen. Shen laughed dryly and changed the topic. He then explained, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. He continued to explain, we saw that Tomono Kakaze's personality was already fixed, so we decided to nurture this personality and not destroy it. After all, we didn't know what kind of personality and soul would be born after we destroyed her. At the same time, Kunzu's soul completely lurked. He roamed the game while secretly monitoring Tomono Kakaze. If he found anything wrong with her, Kunzu would kill her immediately. This was Kunzu's decision. We didn't have the right to interfere. In the following 200 years, everything went smoothly. We gradually let down our guard. Who would have thought that in these 3 years, there would be many unpredictable changes in the game? These changes were also purposely concealed by Tomono Kakaze. She even wiped away all traces. Because Tomono Kakaze's traces were very well hidden, we could only obtain a little information after a long time. For example, in this King Arthur's Betrayal Instance dungeon, the NPC's personality had changed to a certain extent. And in this Heroes Arise from Insignificance Instance dungeon, there was some sort of extension of the mission plot. In the initial instance dungeon, we actually lost a fragment of the consciousness of the King of Yu, Go Jian Jian, that was not registered. As for the 12 skyscraping temples instance dungeon, if it weren't for the fact that we found clues in a pile of discarded data, we wouldn't have known that such a dungeon existed in the game. Xian's gaze landed on Guhan. He looked deeply at Guhan and said, "Although I do not have enough evidence, I believe that these dungeons should be related to you, Guhan." "How did you know?" Guhan asked back. However, this question also indirectly admitted that he was related to these anomalies. "Because of the last message I received from Tomono Kakaze." Xian sighed. He clicked on his personal terminal and a message was projected. The message came from Tomono Kakaze, sent to Xian. There were only 4 simple words in the message. "Guhan, save me." This was the last message I received from Tomono Kakaze. After that, there were no more messages from her. Fortunately, Guhan, you came to Yangjing on your own. Otherwise, even if you didn't come, I would have asked the Great Sun Sword Immortal to find you. Because the key to solving our current predicament may very well be on you, Xian said directly. Based on what I know, the reason why humans can't leave the game is because their souls are controlled by the biological brain. But the one controlling the biological brain isn't Tomono Kakaze's soul. Her soul is also imprisoned by the biological brain. The one controlling the biological brain is a personality or soul we don't know about. Xian finally revealed the reason why the players were trapped in the game. "Mr. Xian, how can you be so sure that the one controlling everything isn't Tomono Kakaze? How can you be so sure that Tomono Kakaze is imprisoned?" Great Sun Sword Immortal asked in confusion. "It's simple. This is what Kanzu told me." Xian pressed on his terminal and a character appeared in front of him. This character was obviously Lord Kanzu. "Strategist, the situation is urgent. I can't say much. Now that Tomono Kakaze is trapped, I must save her immediately. If I can save Tomono Kakaze, then the danger can be resolved. But if everything doesn't return to normal after 10 minutes, then it means I've failed too. Then only my cheap disciple Guhan can save this world." Kanzu's image disappeared after saying this. "It's because of Kanzu's words that I'm sure Tomono Kakaze is trapped." Xian looked at Guhan and said meaningfully, "Lord Guhan, how long do you plan on hiding these things? What do you need me to do?" Guhan nodded. "I hope Guhan can tell us everything you know about Tomono Kakaze. You're the leader of humanity now. There's no need to hide the biggest secret in your heart. No one in the entire human society will dare to do anything to you. If you're still worried, we can talk in a small room alone. I swear on Zheng that I won't tell anyone your secret." Xian narrowed his eyes. He had seen through Guhan's thoughts and knew what Guhan was worried about. He also knew what words to use to persuade Guhan to have the best effect. "Who's Zheng?" "Your girlfriend." Guhan smiled and asked curiously. "Who knows? Maybe." Xian shrugged. "There's no need. The Great Sun Sword Immortal is not an outsider. After all, this concerns the lives of tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of people. It's better to tell everyone. But I hope that everyone here will not hide anything. Tell us everything you know. Working together is the only way to save us from this crisis." Ji Yuhan sighed. "Well said." Xian started clapping and said with a smile, "Then I'll be honest. Zheng isn't my girlfriend. She's just a husky I raise." Using Xian's joke, the atmosphere in the hall eased up. Guhan began to narrate the story between him and Tomono Kakaze, including how he snatched away Kunzu's Gojen sword in the first instance, how he first met Yi Qing in Heroes Begin with Insignificance, and the fact that Yi Qing had left many clues in the game. The strangeness of Artoria and Merlin in King Arthur's betrayal, as well as that Emperor's sword rank mission. Lastly, the strangeness of the 12 skyscraping temples, as well as his contact with Kanzu in the game. In short, apart from the secret that Zhejendi was a woman and liked him, Guhan revealed almost all the secrets without hiding anything. Guhan knew that now wasn't the time to hide anything. "You're saying that Zhejendi left something like this in the game?" Lionian Ling and the Great Sun Sword Immortal said in disbelief after hearing Guhan's narration. They couldn't imagine that this was related to Zhejendi from 800 years ago. "No, it's very possible." Xian, on the other hand, didn't show any surprise after hearing Guhan's narration. Instead, he looked as if he had already guessed it was him. After all, this bat system was proposed by Zhegendi, and the core blueprints for this system were also provided by Zhegendi. Back then, I thought it was strange that Zhegendi, a person who was obsessed with swordsmanship and fame, would be interested in making a bat system. He even provided a set of blueprints. Although he told me that he got the blueprints from an underground military base before the apocalypse, I scanned the entire set of blueprints and found that it was printed over a period of 2 years. There were many mistakes that beginners would make. This kind of blueprints couldn't have been designed by a government organization, or else the person who made the blueprints would have been killed by the government a long time ago. It was more like someone who only knew how to make simple blueprints, and wrote it according to his own ideas. Xian sighed. So, the bat system was Zhegendi's idea from the start. The great sun sword immortal and Lionian Ling sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. At that time, he was already the world-famous and unparalleled Zhegendi. Although I felt that it was a bit inappropriate, I thought of the wonderful future of the bat system, and because of Zhegendi's influence, I decided to take the lead in the construction of the bat system. Xian said. Could it be that this crisis was also Zhegendi's arrangement? The great sun sword immortal said in disbelief. No. It has nothing to do with Zhegendi. The reason why this crisis occurred was because of the biological brain. But in the original blueprints that Zhegendi gave me, the biological brain didn't exist. It was a problem we found during the actual manufacturing process, and it was decided by me and other great scientists. So Zhegendi can't be the culprit of this crisis. Xian hurriedly explained. That is why, based on my inference, the truth of the matter should be that while we were overly focused on monitoring Tomono Kakaze, we neglected to monitor the creature's brain itself, to the extent where another soul was slowly taking form in the creature's brain. When it finally matured, it took control of the entire biological brain and gained control of the game. It even absorbed the souls of all the players in the game into the biological brain as hostages for its survival. Xian slowly concluded. If I'm not wrong, it will soon be time for them to ask for ransom. Chapter 1282. Sir, there's a communication being sent from within the game. It's trying to communicate with us. The staff in charge of monitoring the game core immediately reported nervously when Xian's last sentence ended. Look. Am I right? The person who wants the ransom is here. Xian smiled bitterly. Connect the communication. Yes. The researcher fiddled with the equipment for a while, and the projector projected the image of a person. It was an 8 feet tall, with a jade-like face, strong and handsome, dressed in cloth clothes, and floating in the air like an immortal. It was hard to imagine that such an elegant person was actually the mastermind behind the entire incident. You've finally shown yourself. I thought you weren't planning on meeting us. Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the mastermind finally show himself. He wasn't afraid of the sky-high price. He was only afraid that the mastermind wouldn't talk. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be able to find a breakthrough. I am Jiangdong's Zhu Gongjin. Greetings, heroes. The first thing the mastermind did after showing himself was to bow to Xian and the others. What an elegant young master. So it's Juyu from the 300 miles of burning red cliff. I didn't expect the mastermind to be you. Xian revealed an extremely shocked expression after listening to his self-introduction. In the end, it all turned into a sigh. That's all in the past. A real man doesn't mention his past achievements. You don't have to mock me anymore. Juyu smiled faintly. All right. Since you've shown yourself, why don't you tell us the truth? What do you want, Governor Ju? Why are you willing to release so many souls from the game? Xian asked helplessly. Why don't you listen to a story before Juyu states his conditions? Juyu changed the topic and started telling a story. However, with so many souls in his hands, Guhan and the others didn't even have the right to refuse. They could only listen to Juyu patiently. When Juyu first came to this world, he knew nothing about it. Juyu said slowly, when you arrived here through the dimensional gate, someone happened to be beside you. After that, he ordered the woman beside him to attack you without any explanation. In the end, he was no match for you and his woman was easily subdued by you. However, you didn't hurt this human and the woman. Instead, he released them and asked in a friendly manner if this was a matter of the world. So, this human told you that you came to the future world, and that the future world had already been destroyed by a visitor who traveled through time and dimensions like me. That's why he attacked you without any explanation, because we are natural enemies. But I don't have any enmity towards him. Instead, I sympathize with the suffering of the humans in this future world. I plan to fight alongside the humans. You told this to the human, and he was very emotional. He apologized to me repeatedly, saying that he had wronged you, and even wanted to make up for his mistake. After that, you and he fought side by side, killed Yuan Ku, and finally arrived at the gates of Yangjing City. At this point, Ju Yu's face suddenly revealed an extremely pained and sinister expression. But that guy betrayed you. He told you that he would first report Yu's situation to your lord and give you a legal identity. But what you waited for was indeed an attack from 5 humans. Those humans all had the same strength as you. You was no match for them at all. You could only wait to be captured. In the beginning, you treated you as his compatriots and treated himself as a member of the human race. He expressed Yu's feelings to you as an apostle. However, you trapped you in a cage and continuously conducted all kinds of cruel experiments on Yu's body. You suffered all kinds of torture from you humans. His body was mutilated and his face was ruined. Even Yu's dantian was shattered by you. Yu is ruthless. You wanted nothing more than to kill all of you. You swore to the heavens that when the river flows in reverse, it will be the time of Yu's revenge. Yu, let me ask you. Do you have a clear conscience when you treat someone who truly cares for his compatriots like this? At this point, Ju Yu no longer had the demeanor of a gentleman. Instead, his face was twisted with endless hatred. Great Sun Sword Immortal. Did our Yangjing City really do such a thing? Hearing Ju Yu's words, Lionian Ling also showed an expression of anger. She could not imagine that her ancestors would actually do such a shameless thing. So she immediately sought confirmation from the Great Sun Sword Immortal. Sigh. The Great Sun Sword Immortal sighed helplessly. Indeed, such a thing did happen, but that was over 600 years ago. At that time, the Battle of the Alps had just ended, and humans were at their most hateful towards Yuan Ku. Unlike your Liu Nian family, who always maintained rationality towards Yuan Ku, we only had one attitude towards Yuan Ku. That was to kill anyone we saw. We did not believe that Yuan Ku had any good intentions. Moreover, if not for the recent appearance of Li Bai, we would not have known that Yuan Ku had not been polluted when he first came to this world. At that time, the sword-bearer thought that Ju Yu was pretending to be kind and wanted to enter the human city to destroy it. That was why he asked the 5 immortal sword-bearers to work together to capture him after entering the city. The Great Sun Sword Immortal explained. So you admit to it. You admit to the sins you committed then. Hearing the Great Sun Sword Immortal's words, Ju Yu let out a few long, bitter sighs. But it's fine if you killed you directly. Why? Why did you torture you like that? Because we knew very little about cosmos-level bandits and universe-level bandits back then, and it was almost impossible for us to capture a universe-level bandit alive. But you took the initiative to deliver yourself to the city gates, and were easily captured by us. From the standpoint of us humans, it was only natural to use you for research, said the Great Sun Sword Immortal. Good. What a great natural. I, Ju Gongjin, have learned my lesson. Ju Yu's expression hardened as he gritted his teeth. But you miscalculated. You did not expect you to have a chance to survive. I don't know how long you was tortured by you. I only know that you tried to use Yu's soul for some experiment. You completely destroyed Yu's body and tried to isolate Yu's soul. But your experiment failed. Yu's soul dissipated, and you was finally freed from your torture. Great Sun Sword Immortal. Why did I not know about this from start to finish? Hearing this, Xian seemed to have reached the end of his patience. He turned around and questioned the Great Sun Sword Immortal. Don't forget, I, Xian, am also a Yuan Ku. Why didn't you capture me for research? This. Inspector Xian, Aren't you asking the obvious? You are the comrade in arms of the sword ancestor. We would never suspect you. As for not telling you, because this is a matter between two different research institutes, we have no need to report this to you. The great sun sword immortal explained weakly. Good. That's how you treat me. Didn't you just say that the three of us should be honest with each other? You still hide such an important matter from me. Xian snorted coldly and continued, then let me guess. If I'm not wrong, the last time Juyu conducted his experiment was when our biological brains conducted the neutral field experiment at the same time, right? Inspector Xian, how do you know about this? The great sun sword immortal asked in shock. Of course, the container that imprisoned the biological brain would only open during the neutral field experiment. Only then would the soul fragments have a chance to enter the biological brain. If I'm not wrong, Governor Ju, you are the one who entered the biological brain, am I right? Xian said. I don't know if you were conducting some neutral field experiment at the time, but when one of my soul fragments was about to completely dissipate, it was absorbed into this brain. After that, I hid in the brain to recuperate, using the soul fragments to strengthen myself. In the end, I found a chance for revenge. Juyu said through gritted teeth. No wonder the report said that the dimensional whirlpool didn't appear after your death. The researchers guessed that it was because of a special soul experiment that caused your death to be different. Your soul was completely destroyed, so the dimensional whirlpool didn't open. Now it seems that it wasn't because your soul completely dissipated, but because your soul survived. The great sun sword immortal slapped himself in the face. Even though this was done by the ancestors of Yangjing City 600 years ago, the great sun sword immortal, the chairman of the Yangjing City Sword Council, felt his face burning when he thought about it. At this point, the truth of everything was finally clear. It turned out that the accident this time was caused by Yangjing City, or rather, the entire human race 600 years ago. It was just that the people 600 years ago didn't expect that the revenge would come from the people 600 years later. Fine. Now that things have been made clear, state your conditions. Governor Ju Yu. Xian's expression calmed down. He looked at Ju Yu with bright eyes. I'll say it again. Since you're willing to communicate with us, there must be something you want. State your conditions. As long as we can do it, we will satisfy you. Is that so? Can you really satisfy me? Ju Yu sneered and looked at Ji Han, who had been silent all this while. What if I want his body? Actually, Ju Yu hasn't changed his original intention. Ju Yu still wants to be a proper human. Ju Yu smiled. Chapter 1283. You want my body? Guhan's face froze. He really did not expect Ju Yu to make such a request. Yuan Ku, the last person who wanted Guhan's life, had been taken away by the dimensional vortex. That's right. Ju Yu nodded and said, I've said that I always want to be a human. Even though I've been tortured by you humans, I haven't changed my mind. I want to take advantage of this opportunity to have a human body, be a real human, and fight for the future of mankind. Haha. Governor Ju Yu, don't you think this is ridiculous? Guhan sneered and said, you have tens of millions of human souls as hostages, and you want to take my body, and you say you want to be a human? Isn't that ridiculous? What's so ridiculous about it? As long as I don't change my mind, it doesn't matter what means I use, as long as I achieve my goal. Ju Yu said calmly, you said that Yu's goal is to be a real human being. Very well. You want to be a human, don't you? Guhan said, I'll find you a young and strong death row prisoner. You just need to borrow his body to resurrect yourself. I'll bear the responsibility for you in the name of Poseidon. As long as you release all human souls, unless it's a great crime of betraying mankind, your descendants will not use what happened today to make things difficult for you. Ha 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 ha. Poseidon, oh Poseidon, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Ju Yu burst out laughing when he heard Guhan's words. What? You don't believe my promise? Guhan asked with a frown. No. I believe in Poseidon's promise, but don't forget, I'm Great Wu's governor, Ju Yu. How can I borrow the body of a death row prisoner to survive? Ju Yu's breath caught in his throat. Moreover, I haven't realized my ambition in life. I lost to him last time, and this time I must defeat him with my own hands. Otherwise, it will be a waste of my time coming to this world to meet him again. The him you're talking about should be Zhuge Kongming, right? Xian let out a long sigh. You two were entangled in your previous life. Can't you two let go of each other in this world? Of course you can. When you defeats him, it will be the time for you to completely let go. Ju Yu said in a clear voice, I'm still the most intelligent person in the world. I don't care if I don't want your body. I'm confident that I can defeat Zhuge Kongming in terms of strategy, but now is the era of power, and Zhuge Kongming has become a flood-level Yuan Ku. If I don't borrow your body, how can I have the chance to defeat Zhuge Kongming with my own hand? At this point, Ju Yu's objective finally became clear. The reason why he wholeheartedly joined the human camp was probably because he wanted to avenge the hatred of his previous life. He wanted to personally defeat Zhuge Kongming, his destined opponent, and not because of the righteousness of the human race. But Zhuge Kongming was a flood-level Yuan Ku. He wasn't an opponent that could be defeated with strategy. That was why Ju Yu wanted Guhan's body. Among all the humans, Guhan had the most potential. Only by borrowing Guhan's body could Ju Yu have 100% chance of defeating Zhuge Kongming. Why don't we change the method and wait for Guhan to become an emperor sword? Then Guhan will kill Zhuge Kongming for you? Xian suggested. No. I must kill him with my own hands. I won't borrow anyone's help. Ju Yu said stubbornly. I'll give you 1 day to think about it. I'll come back to you after 1 day. If you don't agree, I'll kill 1,000,000 human souls every day until all human souls are dead. As soon as Ju Yu finished speaking, he disappeared from the projection. His final sentence had completely cut off all other possibilities, and everyone's eyes were now focused on Ji Yu Han. Why are you looking at me? Don't we still have 1 day? Guhan shrugged indifferently when he saw the passionate and hopeful gazes of the people around him. I'm tired. I'll go back and rest. We'll meet here again tomorrow. Guhan left immediately after finishing his sentence. Wait for me. Liuyan Ling immediately chased after him. Inform the other sword immortals to keep an eye on Guhan at all times. Beware of his escape. Great Sun Sword Immortal said to a staff member beside him as he watched Guhan's back disappear into the elevator. There's no need to do such a boring thing. Xian shook his head. Guhan won't escape. You can rest assured. If he wants to leave, no one can stop him unless Haotian Jendi intervenes. I advise you to run. This is no longer a safe place. Liuyan Ling immediately advised Guhan after returning to Guhan's hotel. I thought you would advise me to stay and sacrifice myself, Guhan said with a smile when he saw Liuyan Ling's anxious face. Although I know from most people's point of view, you should stay and even sacrifice yourself, but I can't say such words. Liuyan Ling said with a face full of anxiety and pain. What about you guys? What do you think? Guhan released all his sword maidens and asked for their opinions. Let's go. It's too dangerous to stay here. Guhan, you won't be a good person either. Chidian expressed her opinion first. Her anxious expression was similar to Liuyan Ling's. I agree with Chidian. There's no need to stay here any longer. We'll only be bullied by both sides. Yi Tian agreed with Chidian. Brother, let's go. It's not fun here. Du Yu pulled Guhan's sleeve and stood on Chidian's side. Don't. Why should we go? It'll be fun if we stay. Zhu Xian saw many people standing with Chidian. She immediately jumped out and said excitedly, I want to see who's so shameless to try and make us sacrifice ourselves. I'll draw a turtle on their faces. It'll be fun, am I right? Sister. Zhu Xian didn't say anything. She let Zhu Xian pull her hand like a child. She said in the end, heaven and earth are heartless. They treat all living things like dogs. Guhan, you don't have to care about these things. Juzi will listen to Master. I'll do whatever Master says. Juzi's answer was the same as before. However, Zhu Xian rolled his eyes and suddenly whispered into Juzi's ear, if Guhan agrees to give his body to Ju Yu, what will you do, Juzi? Will you listen to Ju Yu's orders too? Aye. Ju's face swelled. Her face showed a rare hint of anger. I'll kill him. But he's using Guhan's body. He's also your master. Ju's yarn continued to provoke. No. He's not Guhan. Only Guhan is Guhan. Juzi will definitely avenge Guhan. Ju's face darkened. Qingpin, what do you think? Guhan likes you the most. Why don't you say something? Ju's yarn saw that Juzi couldn't provoke, so he immediately whispered into Qingpin's identity and asked Qingpin. I'm going to draw a circle on his stomach and pull out his intestines. Poor Qing pouted and said. Poor 8 also cooperated with their master's emotions. They stuck out their little heads from poor Qing's hair and nodded in unison. That's right. That's right. Shushui, you're. Guhan wanted to ask for Shushui's opinion. However, when he turned around, he realized that Shushui hadn't been freed yet. I don't want to see that woman. I won't come out, Shushui said in Guhan's Zifu. The woman she was talking about was obviously Lionian Ling. It seemed that the gap between these two sisters wasn't that deep. I say, Guhan, don't ask for your sword lady's opinion anymore. Listen to me and leave now. Otherwise, it'll really be too late. I'm afraid that Hao Tianjendi will make a move in the end. Lionian Ling said anxiously. I can't leave. Guhan shook his head. If I leave, these tens of millions of human souls will be completely finished. I may not care about the people in other cities, but I can't do that in my Yuzhang city. I have to save them. So, you're planning to be a good person and really give your body to Juyu? Lionian Ling said impatiently. That's not for sure. Guhan smiled slightly. Maybe I want to be a saint. Chairman, everyone is in place. There are thousands of people surrounding the entire hotel. The surrounding void has also been sealed. There are also 4 immortal swordsmen guarding the 4 sides to ensure that Guhan can't escape from the hotel. In the headquarters of the Sword Committee, a subordinate reported to the Great Sun Sword Immortal. I know. You can leave now. The Great Sun Sword Immortal looked at the hotel that Guhan was staying in through the window. His face was full of guilt as he said, Your Majesty, I'm sorry. I didn't want to do this either. But there are tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of human souls in here. This is all I can do. Compared to the Great Sun Sword Immortal's guilt, the people in the various base cities were probably even more frantic. When these people realized that their loved ones couldn't escape from the game no matter what, they were already panicking. Although the television repeatedly assured the people that this was only a large-scale bug in the game system, that everyone's lives were still safe, and that these trapped humans could immediately leave the game. At first, people still chose to believe the government's explanation, believing that their loved ones would wake up soon. But when they realized that the entire world's network had been cut off in an instant, that all modern communication tools had lost their function, and that there was no response from their loved ones even after 7 or 8 hours had passed. Only the television stations kept repeating the news that reassured everyone. The angry people exploded. They started to take to the streets, forming waves of people, and headed towards the various important human government departments and core areas to surround. In an instant, the entire human society was thrown into chaos. Chapter 1284. We want the truth. We want the truth. We want the truth. The enraged crowd took to the streets and began to cry out. They were angry at the government's stupidity and concealment. In the face of the people's protests, the dozen or so projection screens around them showed officials shouting to the crowd, hoping that the crowd would calm down and deal with all this rationally. Of course, this was of no use. Looking at everything that was happening outside the window, Lionian Ling's expression was extremely ugly. Guhan, on the other hand, was very calm, as if he did not see any of this. But what happened next completely put Lionian Ling in a difficult position. The image on the projection screen that was broadcasting the officials' persuasions suddenly changed, and an armored general appeared. It was none other than Ju Yu. Since everyone wants to know the truth, then Ju Yu will tell everyone the truth. Ju Yu spoke frankly and confidently on the projection screen, telling the entire story. Finally, he even told everyone about how he wanted to use Guhan's body to exchange for the lives of those souls. Guhan. I know you can see this video. The souls of these tens of millions of people are in your hands. You must not make any irrational decisions. Don't worry, after I obtain your body, I will definitely fulfill your unfulfilled wish. I will kill all the Yuan Ku. That way, you will not have lived in vain. That's right, and everyone here, if you want to see your loved ones alive, then beg your Majesty the Sea King. Only if he is willing to sacrifice himself will your loved ones be able to return alive. Ha 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 ha. After saying this, Ju Yu's projection was cut off. Then, the figures of the embarrassed officials appeared on the projection screen again. Your Majesty the Sea King, I'm sorry, this video must have been planted in the television station by Ju Yu beforehand. We have already cut off the network. Ju Yu cannot communicate with the outside world. After a while, the Great Sun Sword Immortal explained. I understand. Guhan did not give the Great Sun Sword Immortal a chance to speak and cut off the communication. What do you think? Is it really a recording that Ju Yu planted at the TV station? Liuyan Ling looked at Guhan and asked. I don't know if they were planted in advance, but I do know that if Yangjing City wanted to stop it, they could have just cut off all television signals the moment the video was broadcast. Guhan laughed coldly. Looks like this Great Sun Sword Immortal wants to use public opinion to force me. After the video was played, all the protesters were stunned. They had to spend a few minutes processing the information in their heads. When these messages were processed, a white-haired old man suddenly looked up to the sky and used his old and desolate voice to shout, Your Majesty the Ocean Emperor, where are you? Come out and say something. Where are you? Your Majesty the Sea King, where are you? Please come out. The old man's voice resonated with the others. At this moment, what they wanted the most was to see Guhan come out personally and tell them that he was willing to use his body to exchange for the lives of their loved ones. More and more people learned of the truth through Ju Yu's video. These people who had lost their loved ones immediately ran out of their homes and joined the crowd protesting and shouting on the streets. More and more people gathered on the streets, from a few million at the beginning to tens of millions. In the end, almost 90% of the people came out of their homes. Once these people came out onto the streets, they shouted along with everyone else, hoping that Guhan would come out and tell them the truth, answer their questions, and most importantly, give them some peace of mind. And this peace of mind was undoubtedly Guhan's declaration. Guhan was willing to sacrifice himself for the lives of tens of millions of people. As a result, the tens of millions of people in Yangjing City asked in unison where Guhan was, hoping that Guhan would come out and meet them. Their voices resounded through the sky, and even the walls of the hotel began to shake violently. Ji Han, should we go out and give them an explanation? Fleeting Time's mind was in a mess when he heard the thunderous cheers. It's fine. Let them shout, we'll just treat it as music. Guhan said indifferently, not the slightest bit bothered by the deafening shouts outside the window. These pitiful people screamed for an entire hour, but Ji Han still did not show himself. Naturally, they felt a sense of sorrow and urgency in their hearts, because Ji Han's attitude had already been expressed through his refusal to show himself. If Guhan was willing to sacrifice himself, then Guhan obviously did not need to continue hiding, and would appear in front of everyone to express his attitude. But if Guhan had been hiding, then it was obvious that Guhan was not willing to agree to all of this. He did not want to sacrifice his small life for the lives of tens of millions of people. Your Majesty the Sea Emperor, this old man begs you. My 3 grandsons are not even 20 years old yet. They still have a lot of years to live. Your Majesty the Sea Emperor, I beg you, we will be grateful to you for a lifetime. Just agree to it. At first, the old man mustered up the last bit of his strength to shout. Then, he bent his knees and knelt on the ground without hesitation, pleading to Ji Han. Your Majesty the Sea Emperor, this old man is also begging you. I beg you. This old man's actions once again infected the surrounding people's actions, and they all knelt down one after another, wanting to use their dignity to beg Guhan for mercy. Because they were worried about their loved ones, more and more people chose to learn from this old man, kneeling on the ground and begging Guhan. The entire street of people knelt down one after another, and even those who did not want to kneel, seeing the reaction of the people around them, involuntarily followed suit. There were even those who were a little more stubborn, and refused to kneel no matter what, but were forcefully pulled down by the clothes of the people around them. Therefore, an hour and 10 minutes after Ju Yu's appearance, 90% of the people in Beijing City knelt on the ground, begging Guhan for mercy and to save their loved ones. Most of them could not even speak, and only the sound of crying could be heard. Soon after, the whole of Beijing City was shrouded in these cries. Guhan. They are too vicious. They. Seeing this scene, seeing tens of millions of people crying at the same time, Liuyan Ling, who had just persuaded Guhan to leave, retreated a few steps weakly, fell to the ground, and muttered, "They are too pitiful. Guhan. Why don't you agree to them? I can die with you." Sigh. Guhan let out a long sigh, and stood up from his chair. He looked through the window at the people kneeling on the street, and said with a bitter smile, "I originally thought that when everyone kneels to me, it would be the time for me to ascend to the throne and become the emperor. Who would have thought that today, in order to take my life, these people would kneel to me?" Ling. Don't you think this is very sad? Guhan said in a melancholy tone. Sad. It's all very sad. Liuyan Ling said dejectedly, humans are sad, these people are sad, and those souls are sad too. Guhan, I really don't know what to do. Come, let's analyze this. If I really agree to these people's request, what will happen to me? Guhan looked at the black mass of people kneeling outside, and said with a smile, first of all, if I really give my body to Ju Yu, I'll definitely die. Or my soul will forever be floating in the game. That's even more tragic than death. However, it's the new me, Ju Yu. Because of my strength, the humans will definitely not let such a combat power disappear. Therefore, they will definitely not do anything to the new Ju Yu. Perhaps they will even shake hands with Ju Yu and become friends with him. Then, it's these people kneeling on the ground. In the first few years of my death, perhaps on this day every year, they will burn incense for me, say a few good things about not having to spend money, and beg me to protect them. Then, in order to create a good reputation for himself, Ju Yu will definitely try his best to clear his name, and slander or suppress my reputation. And whether it's the great Sun Sword Immortal or the other immortal sword wielders in Yangjing City, in order to cover up the fact that they forced me to do so today, they will definitely cooperate with Ju Yu to clear his name, so that everyone else can clear their names with him. In this world, the people are the easiest to deceive. Therefore, it's not too bad that I'm completely forgotten by the people. Perhaps I'll even be slandered as an unforgivable villain, and Ju Yu will become the savior of humanity, while I'll become a clown on his path to success. This is probably the result of me agreeing to sacrifice myself. What do you think? Guhan asked Liuyan Ling. And Liuyan Ling opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she could not say a single word. Because she understood that the truth was very likely to be as Guhan had said. Guhan, a great man who had sacrificed himself, would ultimately be slandered as a villain. This kind of example was not uncommon, and the history books were filled with such unlucky people. After a moment of silence, Liuyan Ling asked again, what if you don't agree? If I don't agree, let's not even talk about whether humanity has any other way to save those souls. Even if there's no other way, then Ju Yu will kill all the human souls. That'll be the end result, Guhan said with a grin. The relatives of those dead humans will probably hate me very much, and want to eat me alive. I can only hide in the wild for a while. In about another 10 or so years, those old things who hate me the most will probably have reached the end of their lifespans and died. Those young people will start to find their own new partners, and form a new life. Let bygones be bygones. And the children will probably completely forget about these things. They won't care about these things. When that time comes, I'll come out and kill a few elite yuan coups, protect a few human cities, and give some consolation money to the families of those who died. Then I'll immediately become a responsible person, a good person who will finish what I started. In order to obtain my protection, all the humans will also suck up to me and sing praises. As for what happened today, it will also be thrown into the long river of history. After all, humans are all realistic animals. Guhan smiled and looked at the door. Great Sun Sword Immortal, what choice do you think I should make? Chapter 1285. Ashamed. Ashamed. The great sun sword immortal pushed the door open and walked into Guhan's room. Actually, he had already arrived long ago, but had been hiding outside the door to eavesdrop on Guhan and Liuonian Ling's conversation. But he had not expected that Guhan had already discovered him. There's no need to speak of shame. Please answer my question, great sun sword immortal. What do you think of this matter? Should I respond to the pleas of those people outside? Guhan asked with narrowed eyes. The great sun sword immortal was in a difficult position. He really did not know how to answer this question. According to the great sun sword immortal's heart, he naturally hoped that Guhan could sacrifice himself for the greater good, and save the lives of tens of millions of people. But when these words were on the tip of his tongue, the great sun sword immortal could not bring himself to say them. Because he knew clearly that this was a moral blackmail. Moreover, Guhan had no moral responsibility. He did not need to sacrifice himself for these humans. Even if it was tens of millions of lives, he could only ask Guhan from a moral point of view. Ari, I only hope that His Majesty the Sea Sovereign can be righteous and make the right decision for humanity. The great sun sword immortal was too ashamed to say it directly, and could only say it in a roundabout way. Righteous? Guhan said this word playfully. He looked meaningfully at the people kneeling outside. Are these people righteous as well? The great sun sword immortal hesitated for a moment, then said through gritted teeth, righteousness is the righteousness of the general situation. The general situation of the world is here, and that is righteousness. In that case, the righteousness of the majority is righteousness, and the righteousness of the minority is not righteousness. A look of disgust flashed across Guhan's face. I heard that before the great calamity, the entire world was a so-called democratic country. All the major and minor matters of the country were decided by democratic voting. Then if one day, 99% of the people of the country voted for the remaining 1% who have not committed any crimes to die, is that still righteousness? Does the government also want to kill those people? Guhan did not give the great sun sword immortal any time to think, and asked without pause. I. The great sun sword immortal was forced into a corner by Guhan's question. Yes, if 99% of humanity voted for the remaining 1% to die, then did the 1% really deserve to die? If this continued, and 99,999% of the world's people wanted the 0.0000001% of Guhan to die, then should Guhan die? The great sun sword immortal felt that he was completely unable to answer this question. His logic was about to be completely messed up. Of course, that is righteousness. The great sun sword immortal could not answer, but someone walked out and answered for him. This person was none other than Chu Xian. I wonder what Mr. Xian's opinion is? Guhan asked with a frown. Guhan, do you know what the history of Yang Huang was like during the Middle Ages before the Great Calamity? Xian asked. It was just a feudal society with a change of dynasties. Although most of the history of the Middle Ages had withered, Guhan still knew the general framework. That's right. Xia, Shong, Ju, Spring and Autumn, Warring States, Qin, Han, Jin, Northern and Southern dynasties, Sui, Tang, 5 dynasties, Song, Yuan, Ming, Qing, as well as the Republic of China and the Celestial Empire. In thousands of years of history, our Yang Huang lived like this. Xian sighed. The affairs of the world must be separated after a long time, and united after a long time. This cycle has continued for thousands of years. This is the righteousness of the world, and also the fate of the world. The people suffer when they prosper, and suffer when they perish. Every change of dynasty meant millions, or even tens of millions of people died in the endless flames of war. The worst time was when all the Han people in the north died. 30 million lives were turned into specters, and 70% of Hua Xia's population was destroyed. I want to ask you, Guhan. Did all those people who died commit crimes that deserved the death penalty? Did they deserve to die in the chaos of war? Weren't they all innocent and pitiful people? There was no need for 99% to 1% voting. 30% of humanity could kill 70% of humanity in the name of righteousness. What's funny is that later generations still sang praises for this period of history. In their textbooks, it was written like this: the who gained power in the north were gradually assimilated into the Han culture, and the barriers between the Hu and Han gradually melted. This period was the time when all the races of Hua-Xia merged. As the dominant culture in the Central Plains, the Han also absorbed the essence of the other races, and injected cultural genes into the prosperity of the Sui and Tang dynasties. Look, it's written so well. The lives of 30 million people in exchange for the great integration of the races and the prosperity of the Sui and Tang dynasties. This is the righteousness of the world. That's why Guhan, as long as the righteousness is there, not just you, even tens of millions of people have to give up their lives. Xian finally finished his sentence. But whether it was Guhan, the great sun sword immortal, Liuanian Ling, or the other sword maidens, everyone was confused. Everyone was confused by Xian's words. They couldn't understand what he was trying to say. It sounded like Xian was telling Guhan that for the righteousness of the world, tens of millions of lives could be sacrificed. Thus, it was only natural that he, Jiyu Han, would sacrifice his insignificant life for them. But after thinking about it carefully, it didn't feel like that at all. Xian was obviously implying something, but he couldn't understand what Xian was trying to say. Thank you, Lord Xian, I understand. Guhan thought for a long time. The muscles on his face suddenly relaxed, and he showed a faint smile. Guhan obviously understood what Xian was trying to say. Do it if you understand. Do what you should do, Xian said. Okay. Guhan nodded. All the sword maidens around him turned into light and flew into the scabbard at Guhan's waist. The atmosphere in the room froze. Everyone knew that Guhan had made up his mind. That was why he recalled all his sword maidens. Get ready. The great sun sword immortal secretly made a gesture with his hand behind his back. The few people behind him immediately took out their personal terminals and whispered a few words. The great sun sword immortal himself stared fixedly at Jiyu Han, not letting him off the hook even if he made a move. Ha. Jiyu Han smiled. With a speed that no one could see, he drew out his extinguish immortal sword and lightly brushed it against the wall in front of him. The entire wall was cut into pieces in an instant. A fierce ray of sunlight shone through the open wall and into the room. At the same time, the people kneeling outside also noticed the commotion in the hotel. They saw an entire wall disappear, revealing many people standing inside. Oh, isn't that Her Majesty Poseidon? A citizen with good eyesight recognized Jiyu Han standing in the room at a glance and said excitedly, "That's right. It's Her Majesty Poseidon. It really is Her Majesty Poseidon." The surrounding people followed closely behind. After confirming that Guhan was in the room, the entire scene became chaotic. Countless people gathered towards the hotel, blocking the path below. It was so tight that even a mouse couldn't find a place to step. Her Majesty Poseidon, save our loved ones. Her Majesty Poseidon, I beg you. My 3 grandsons aren't of age yet. I beg you. Save them. The citizens began to cry out loudly, tears streaming down their faces. Tens of millions of people kneeling and begging. Even someone with a heart made of stone would be moved by this scene. However, Guhan in the room didn't respond. For a few minutes, he didn't say a word. He just looked at everyone quietly. This made everyone's heart feel anxious. They didn't know what decision Guhan would make. For a moment, the entire Yangjing city was filled with anxiety. Everyone, stop talking. Her Majesty Poseidon is willing to come out to see us. It must mean that she has agreed to everyone's request. Everyone, don't worry. Someone shouted loudly. He was amazing. Before Guhan could speak, he had already made a decision for Guhan. Yes. Everyone, quickly kowtow. Quickly kowtow and thank Her Majesty Poseidon. There were some smart people among them. They immediately understood the deeper meaning of this and began to make a ruckus around them. The crowd followed the crowd. When they heard that Guhan was willing to save them, they didn't care so much and started kowtowing to Guhan. Soon, everyone in Yangjing City was kowtowing to Guhan. Some people's foreheads were even swollen. At this time, even an idiot could see that these people wanted to create a predetermined fact, and then use it to force Guhan. Look, these tens of millions of people are kowtowing to you at the same time, and you still have the face to refuse everyone's request. This was like saying, we all say that resettling refugees is a good thing. Huaxia, you should hurry up and open your country's doors to resettle the refugees. Otherwise, how can you live up to the universal values? Well, although this analogy was a little off, it basically meant the same thing. What a powerful method. Seeing this scene, Xian couldn't help but mutter to himself. The great sun sword immortal behind him blushed. Obviously, this method was arranged by him. After the great sun sword immortal blushed, he turned his gaze to Guhan. He really wanted to know what choice Guhan would make under the pleas of these tens of millions of people. Everyone. I know all your request. Finally, Guhan stepped out of the room and walked straight in the air. At this moment, everyone raised their heads and stared at Ji Yuhan in the sky, wanting to hear the words that they were waiting for from his mouth. I admit, you are indeed very pitiful. Your family is your backbone, and now you have become a group of dogs with broken backs. Guhan's voice was extremely loud. With the transmission of sword chi, not to mention those near the hotel, even those tens of kilometers away could hear him clearly. Chapter 1286. Broken Back Hound? What does that mean? People started to ask each other. Most of them were not cultured enough to understand the meaning of broken back hound. Only a small number of people were livid and told the people around them the meaning of broken back hound. At this time, everyone understood that Guhan was calling them dogs. Surnamed Ji Yu, you actually dare to call us dogs? That's right. What right do you have to scold us? How can you scold us? Do you still have the qualities of a sword wielder? Some people who could not hold back their anger immediately jumped out and criticized Guhan. How strange. Guhan revealed a disdainful smile. You guys are begging me to sacrifice my life, so I can't even ask for a word of scolding you. Guhan's words made people suddenly silent. Yes, they were begging him to sacrifice his life, so didn't they have the right to scold him? Most people were silent, but there was still a small number of people who were unwilling to be insulted by Guhan like this. They continued to refute, this has nothing to do with our lives, this is our dignity. What right do you have to insult our dignity? Ha 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 ha. What a big joke, it's really funny. Guhan could not help but be amused by such words, so dignity is more important than life. Alright, I will respect your dignity and then kill you, okay? That person was scared and did not dare to speak anymore. However, Guhan did not intend to let him go. Guhan's hand clenched in the void, and that person was caught by an invisible sword chi. Like a little chick, he was caught in front of Guhan. This poor guy kept struggling like a drowning cat. Come, 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 Guhan said with a smile, how about this? No matter how insulting you are, I will let you insult me 100 times. I will give you enough dignity, and then you will sacrifice your life, okay? As soon as Guhan's voice fell, a gleaming sword flew out of Guhan's dimensional pocket. The sharp blade was aimed at the man's chest, causing him to scream in fear. I was wrong. Let me go. Dignity is not as important as life. This guy was really frightened. Not only did hot tears flow out of his eyes, but even his lower body also had stinky liquid flowing out. Soon, it soaked his pants and finally fell to the ground. As for the humans on the ground, they hurriedly tried to escape with a look of disgust on their faces. However, the ground was too crowded, and there was no space for them to escape. In the end, the entire ground was in a complete mess, as if it was a joke. Useless bastard. Guhan saw that this person had pissed all over, and tossed him back out of boredom. The great sun sword immortal immediately flew out and caught this unlucky guy, saving his life. Otherwise, he would definitely have fallen to his death. Your Majesty the Sea King, how can you do this? Among the tens of millions of people, there was no lack of courageous people. A scholarly youth stood up from the ground and looked straight at Guhan. You are the Sea King, how can you play with us like this? Do you still want your Sea King's face? I don't want to. Ji Han replied without hesitation. This youth was instantly choked by Gu Han. Your Majesty the Sea King, we tens of millions of people are kneeling on the ground begging you. Don't you have any compassion? Can't you sacrifice yourself for the lives of tens of millions of people? A young woman in her 30s also stood up from the ground. She looked fearlessly at Gu Han and asked loudly, some of these people are still children who have just come of age, some are the parents of newborn children, and some are middle-aged people who have dedicated their lives to this world. There are also countless people who are closest to their parents, and many sword-bearers who have fought alongside you. Can you bear to see these people die? Hearing this, Gu Han couldn't help but nod. It must have been hard on you. You memorized such a long paragraph. Not bad. I didn't. The young woman was stunned when she heard this and quickly refuted. It's fine. It doesn't matter if you memorized it or not. You can come over too. Ji Han smiled, and just like the man, the young woman was caught by Ji Han and brought in front of him. You just said that tens of millions of people are kneeling on the ground begging me. I should sacrifice my life, right? Gu Han said and confirmed again. That's what you mean, right? That's right. The young woman closed her eyes and said righteously. Good. 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 Ji Han said the word good 3 times, then looked at the young woman with a gentle look and asked, May I ask what your name is? My name is Bai Jie. The young woman didn't understand why Gu Han would ask her name, but she still answered stiffly. That's good. Miss Bai Jie, I'll give you a chance. Gu Han handed the sword to the young woman and said to the people kneeling below, the decision is not in my hands, but in the hands of this Miss Bai Jie. You guys beg her now. If she's willing to sacrifice her life to help me, I'll help you guys. Ji Han's words caused everyone to freeze for a moment. After a short moment of shock, everyone immediately called out without hesitation, Miss Bai Jie, I'm begging you. Miss Bai Jie. These people's tone was very sincere. It was not much different from when they begged Gu Han. Bai Jie was a little dumbfounded when she heard the countless people she gave birth to plead with her. These voices seemed to be controlling her body. The sword in her hand couldn't help but tremble, and the tip of the sword gradually approached her neck. Seeing Bai Jie's actions, the people found that they were getting closer and closer to the life of their loved ones. They immediately became more anxious, and the voices became several times more intense than before. Every word was like a knife, deeply stabbing into Bai Jie's heart, forcing her to end her life. Do you have a child? Just as the sword in Bai Jie's hand was about to touch her neck, Gu Han suddenly asked. I have, in my stomach. When Bai Jie said this, she was a little dumbfounded, but in the next second, she came to her senses. Yes, her child is still in her stomach. If she dies, then wouldn't my child be? Thinking of this, Bai Jie felt that the shouts outside were like crazy beasts that wanted to skin her alive. She could no longer bear such fear and love for her child. The sword in her hand fell to the ground, and she cried, I don't want to die. I still have my child. I can't die. Gu Han snorted coldly, and Bai Jie gently fell to the ground, escaping from Gu Han's clutches. But she only escaped from Gu Han's clutches. Seeing Bai Jie fall to the ground, the surrounding people immediately surrounded her. Each of these people had a hideous expression, and their faces were filled with madness and anger. They cursed loudly, Why don't you agree to our request? Why don't you die? You bitch, didn't you hear us begging you so earnestly? Why don't you die? That's right. Do you still have a little conscience? Our children's lives are in the game. That's the lives of tens of millions of people. Why don't you die? I still have a child. My child is in my stomach. I can't die. I really can't die. Bai Jie was frightened by this scene, and she stuttered. Bit. What's your life? What's your child that hasn't grown up? It's just 2 cheap lives. How can it compare to the lives of tens of millions of people? That's right, it's just 2 people's lives. Sacrificing them can save tens of millions of people's lives. This is a great thing. What right do you have to refuse? What right do you have to live? It's this bitch. She caused the death of our family. I'm going to kill you. An old man who was about to die suddenly shouted, and then he removed a belt from his waist and slapped Bai Jie's face. This old man's action completely triggered the anger of the others. They imitated the old man, removed the belt, and began to slap Bai Jie's body. Worrying about the lives of their loved ones, suffering and fear for more than 10 hours, as well as the unwillingness and anger of kneeling on the ground for more than an hour, and finally, Guhan's unyielding attitude. All of these added together caused the inner demon in everyone's heart to grow. When there was a reasonable target that everyone agreed on, this target naturally became the best target for them to vent their anger on. In less than 10 seconds, Bai Jie's body was left with dozens of deep belt marks. Oh no! The great Sun Sword Immortal realized that something was wrong. Without another word, he immediately opened the Gate of Void. In the next second, he appeared beside Bai Jie and pulled her into the Gate of Void. When Bai Jie came out of the Gate of Void, her body was already a bloody mess. She was also on the verge of death. A pool of blood flowed from her lower body, and it looked like she was about to die. Guhan. The great Sun Sword Immortal looked deeply at Guhan. If Bai Jie really died in the hands of these thugs, then Guhan would have an absolute reason to refuse. Even if he didn't consider this, if this matter spread out that someone in Yangjing City beat a poor pregnant woman to death for the lives of their loved ones, then Yangjing City's reputation would become a pile of dog shit. So no matter what, the great Sun Sword Immortal couldn't let Bai Jie die here. Without another word, he sent Bai Jie into his medical pod. After a while, the medical pod showed that Bai Jie's vitals were stable and she was safe. But her unborn child in the womb wasn't so lucky. The medical pod didn't have the ability to treat such an unborn child. This child was already dead. Chapter 1287. Guhan, what the hell are you going to do? Looking at Guhan floating outside the window, and then looking at the pale mature woman in the medical cabin, Liuyan Ling was worried. Liuyan Ling couldn't imagine what she would do if she was in Guhan's position. Since Miss Bai Jie is not willing to sacrifice herself, then I naturally can't sacrifice myself. Friends, goodbye. Guhan in the sky smiled slightly and said to the crowd on the road. What? The people kneeling on the ground were shocked. This Guhan is actually going to leave. Next, Guhan used his actual actions to prove that he was telling the truth. Guhan's body began to fly quickly towards the city wall. With Guhan's speed, in less than 10 minutes, Guhan can leave Yangjing City. We can't let him go. We can't let him go. The people on the ground shouted one after another. Those who said that they couldn't let Guhan go were still polite. Some people with bad tempers directly shouted, "Don't let this beast go, let him pay for the death of our loved ones. That's right, don't let go of this immoral and ungrateful bastard, we want him to pay for the deaths of our loved ones." Alright, Ji Han instantly became an immoral and ungrateful bastard. That's right. This bastard just forced a poor woman and the child in her stomach to die. It's all because of this bastard. The people who had just beaten up Bai Jie rolled their eyes and shouted in unison from the crowd. Since Guhan has become the target of public criticism, it's best to throw the crime of murder on Guhan's head. In the blink of an eye, Ji Han had turned from the Ocean Emperor that everyone respected, the Ocean Emperor that knelt on the ground and begged for mercy, into a beast that everyone wanted to eat alive. The story behind this could not be said to be a comedy, but it could not be said to be not interesting, and it could not be said to be not sad. It doesn't matter, we definitely can't let Guhan leave, do it. In the room, the great Sun Sword Immortal ordered his personal terminal. Immediately, the entire void of Yangjing City began to tremble. 6 positions in all directions of Guhan's path appeared at the same time, and finally, 6 void doors opened in 6 directions. 6 immortal sword bearers walked out of the void doors and tightly surrounded Guhan. Yo! 6 immortal sword bearers. What a grand scene! Seeing the appearance of the 6 immortal sword bearers, Guhan suddenly stopped in midair. This was because Guhan knew that if he didn't find a way to get rid of these 6 immortal sword bearers, he wouldn't be able to leave this place. Yangjing City had the highest number of immortal sword bearers out of all the base cities. There were a total of 9 immortal sword bearers, and 6 of them blocked Guhan's path. Sirs, you really think highly of me, Guhan, to actually set up such a grand scene. Seeing that all 6 immortal sword-bearers had appeared, Guhan said mockingly. At the same time, he looked at the immortal sword-bearer blocking his northwest direction and said, "Senior Sword Immortal Wuzhang, the two of us meet again." Yes, the immortal sword-bearer blocking Guhan's northwest direction was none other than Wuzhang Shifang, the immortal sword-bearer that Guhan had first met in Yangjing City. He had also almost become Guhan's master. "Guhan, sigh. I've let you down today." Wuzhang Shifang's expression was one of embarrassment. Of course, he knew that Guhan had no obligation to sacrifice his life for humanity. But now, the lives of tens of millions of people had forced Wuzhang Shifang to stand against Guhan. This made Wuzhang Shifang, who used to have a good relationship with Guhan, feel extremely embarrassed, and he was deeply reprimanded. "Your Majesty the Sea King, today, the 6 of us have stopped you, but for the sake of humanity, Your Majesty the Sea King will have to suffer." A handsome, model-like immortal sword-bearer said, "Your Majesty the Sea King, you'd better surrender. With the 6 of us here, you won't be able to escape from us. Isn't this our Starry Night Sword Immortal, Master Xia Zichin?" Starry Night Sword Immortal was the youngest immortal sword-bearer in Yangjing City. He had only become an immortal sword-bearer the year before last. And this immortal sword-bearer had a world-famous hobby. He had no interest in women, but he did not like pure men either. He liked crossdressers. And his 2 wives were extremely popular crossdressers on the internet. Their marriage had caused an uproar all over the world, dominating the news headlines for a whole year. Guhan smiled slightly and asked, "May I ask Starry Night Sword Immortal, in the great cause of humanity, is there a rule that says innocent people must sacrifice their lives to save others?" "Of course there is no such rule." Sword Immortal Starry Night heaved a faint sigh before speaking in a righteous voice, "But as humans, we cannot go against the greater good of the human race. Since the lives of tens of millions of people are at stake, and since these tens of millions of humans are kneeling before Your Majesty, the Sea Monarch, then why doesn't Your Majesty show some compassion and help these pitiful people?" "Oh, is that so?" Guhan looked at Starry Night Sword Immortal with a smile and said, "I heard that when Starry Night Sword Immortal wanted to marry Madame Xian Mo and Madame Yuchan, your father and mother knelt before you and begged you not to do such a thing and kill off the Xia family's descendants. Why did Starry Night Sword Immortal ignore them in the end? Could it be that the dignity of your parents can't compare to the prayers of those insignificant people?" The Starry Night Sword Immortal's face instantly turned deathly pale. Everyone knew that he had married those 2 crossdressers despite the pressure from his parents. Even now, his parents had not forgiven him and did not allow the Starry Night Sword Immortal to take a single step into their home. This had always been the greatest source of pain in the Starry Night Sword Immortal's heart. Today, he had been exposed by Guhan, and he was instantly rendered speechless. "Bah! You be ****, don't hit me in the face when you're hitting me, but don't point out my shortcomings when you're insulting me. How could you use this kind of topic to humiliate the Starry Night Sword Immortal? Is this Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal Lord Ran Tianhao?" Guhan asked the bearded man. "That's right, it's me." The bearded man nodded and admitted. This bearded man was just like his title. He was a man with a fiery temper like thunder and fire. He might not be the strongest among all the immortal sword immortals in Yangjing City, but his temper was definitely the most explosive. I heard that the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal and a few dozen of his teammates went to destroy the Hero Alliance's base, but in the end, the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal escaped alone. In the end, only 3 of his sword immortals returned to Yangjing City. These 3 surviving companions never spoke to the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal again. They didn't even want to see his face. From then on, they were like strangers. "What's the reason for this?" Guhan asked with a smile. "You." The Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal's face twitched. That was the biggest blemish in his life. Back then, he was merely a treasure sword immortal, but with his fiery temper, he didn't even care about the dragongrade Yuan Ku. He and his companions went to challenge the Hero Alliance's base. Naturally, the entire team suffered a crushing defeat. In the end, the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal was scared out of his wits. He abandoned his brothers on the battlefield and escaped first. However, he didn't expect that 3 of his companions would escape and spread the news. Since then, the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal became a disgrace to Yangjing City. Even after the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal became an immortal sword, immortal sword, immortal sword, immortal sword, immortals, people kept bringing up this blemish. Of course, no one dared to mention this to the Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal's face, except for this Guhan. Thunder and Fire Sword Immortal, you abandoned a few dozen brothers for your own life back then. Why can't I, Guhan, abandon these ignorant fools for my own life today? Guhan asked coldly. No matter how thick-skinned Sword Immortal Thunder and Fire was, he couldn't say anything in the face of Guhan's question. After all, his actions in the past had been improper. He had no right to advise Guhan. Your Majesty, there is no need to bring up the past again. Thunder Fire has already turned over a new leaf, and he has made great contributions to humanity. Later on, he personally destroyed the Hero Alliance base to avenge his friends. Thunder Fire has already made up for his past mistakes. Another Immortal Sword rank swordsman jumped out to defend the Thunder Fire Sword Immortal. You must be Sword Immortal Jinmu of the Minamoto clan. Guhan glanced at the Immortal Sword wielder who had spoken. He was Sword Immortal Minamoto of the Minamoto clan, and he had the closest relationship with the Thunder Fire Sword Immortal. They were extremely good friends, so it was only natural that he would speak up for the Thunder Fire Sword Immortal. Oh, Sword Immortal Minamoto, what you say makes a lot of sense. This junior has learned his lesson. Guhan bowed slightly to this Sword Immortal Minamoto of the Minamoto clan. Seeing Guhan bow to him, the Sword Immortal Minamoto of the Minamoto clan had a smug expression on his face. However, in the next second, his expression crumbled. Then, according to Senior Minamoto, as long as I turn over a new leaf, I can make up for my past mistakes. Then this junior will go kill that living brain and kill Ju Yu, who is residing in the brain. This way, I will avenge those innocent victims, and I will have successfully turned over a new leaf and made up for my past mistakes. I, Guhan, will still be a great hero of humanity. Guhan's words rendered the Minamoto clan Sword Immortal Minamoto completely speechless. The other party was using his own logic to defeat him. If he wanted to convince the other party, he would first have to shatter his own logic. How could the Minamoto clan Sword Immortal Minamoto of the Minamoto clan do that? In the end, he could only keep quiet. Chapter 1288. Guhan, don't try to talk your way out here. Another female Sword Immortal could not stand it anymore. She jumped out and said, "Are you a man or not? If you are, then take responsibility for this. What's so great about bullying women? You even bullied a pregnant woman. Do you know that the child in that poor woman's belly has already died because of you? You are a murderer." This female Sword Immortal level sword wielder said indignantly. She was Frosty Sword Immortal, Frosty Moon. "Go away, woman. I can't be bothered to talk to you, and I don't want to waste words with you," Guhan said disdainfully. Frosty Sword Immortal, F***CK off. Cough cough. I won't say anything. The last lingering Sword Immortal, Li Hua, said with a pained expression. All right, all 6 Sword Immortal level sword wielder had finally appeared. Oh, no, not 6, but 7. After lingering Sword Immortal Li Hua finished speaking, the Great Sun Sword Immortal also appeared beside Guhan. 7 Sword Immortal level sword wielder surrounded Guhan at the same time. In addition, Guhan did not have the ability to enter the void. This time, it was really impossible for Guhan to escape. Good. Catch him. Catch this B*****. At the same time, seeing the 7 Sword Immortal level sword wielder surrounding Guhan, the citizens on the streets immediately began to cheer. They jumped up from the ground and sang and danced, cheering as if the carnival had arrived. These ignorant fools. One of the sword wielder in the sky said with disgust as he looked at the singing and dancing on the ground. However, the person who spoke was not Guhan, but Starry Night Sword Immortal, Xia Zichin. Although one of his 3 views had been ruined, the other 2 were surprisingly upright. Of course, these people think that I can't escape, and think that I can use my life to exchange for the lives of their loved ones. Of course they're going to start celebrating, Guhan said with a smile. Seeing Ji Han's smile, the rest of the people couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. This guy could still laugh at this time. What exactly was in his head? Your Majesty, do you think you can escape? Seeing the smile on Guhan's face, the great Sun Sword Immortal was actually a little nervous, and asked in a trembling voice. Of course I can escape. Guhan nodded matter-of-factly. So you think you can defeat all 7 of us alone? The great Sun Sword Immortal was very sure that it was impossible for Ji Han to defeat 7 immortal sword wielders single-handedly. But since these words came out of Ji Han's mouth, the great Sun Sword Immortal had a strange feeling in his heart. This Ji Han was probably speaking the truth. He really did not take the 7 immortal sword-bearers seriously at all. Then let's give it a try. Guhan raised the immortal extinguished sword in his hand, and all the sword immortal level-bearers went into a state of extreme vigilance. They immediately released their sword immortal level sword maidens, and a battle between the 8 supreme sword-bearers was about to begin. The people on the streets also stopped cheering at this moment. They held their breaths and stared at the sky. Such a civil war between human sword-bearers could be said to be unparalleled in the world. Perhaps even after a few hundred years, they would not see another civil war like this. Just when everyone thought that this battle was about to begin, Guhan, who had already held his sword in his hand, retracted it as if nothing had happened. Looking at the 7 sword immortal level-bearers around him, he said with a smile, "Everyone, have you all forgotten the agreement Kunzu made with all the sword-bearers 1,000 years ago? Sword-bearers can never fight amongst each other. Have you all forgotten this rule?" Hearing Guhan suddenly bring up Kunzu's agreement, these sword-bearers were at a loss for words, and did not know how to respond. "I beg everyone to think carefully. If we start a war today, won't we be completely breaking the rule that humans have followed for the past 1,000 years? Ji Han spoke in a serious tone. If you and I break this rule today, wouldn't we be setting a bad example for our future generations? Our future generations can learn from us today, killing each other for their own benefits. Wouldn't that be cutting off the future of humanity?" Hearing Guhan's words, these sword-bearers were even more at a loss for what to do. This was indeed the agreement between Kunzu and all the sword-bearers, and it was also the rule that the sword-bearers had followed for 1,000 years. It was fine if some low-level sword-bearers fought, but if one of the 8 sword-bearers with the strongest combat power of humanity fought, the impact would be really huge. This was just like in the Middle Ages. Ever since the phrase kings, marquises, and generals would rather have guts was shouted in Day's village, there had been continuous peasant uprisings in Huaxia, and it had not stopped for thousands of years. Before Day's village, there had never been a peasant uprising in Huaxia. P.S. Although it is not known whether there had been a peasant uprising before Day's village in real history, at least in the records of historians. But at least in the records of historians, there had been no peasant uprising before Day's village. And the phrase kings, marquises, and generals would rather have guts in Day's village had indeed inspired the unwillingness of the people of Huaxia to be persecuted, and it had also contributed to the magnificent history of peasant uprisings for thousands of years in Huaxia's history. In short, once these 8 top sword-bearers started fighting today, no matter what the final outcome of the battle was, it would still destroy the covenant that Kunzu and the other sword-bearers had made for 1,000 years. Once there was the first destroyer, the future generations would have a lot less scruples. At that time, more and more sword-bearers would have internal strife, and the entire human race might go into a state of decline. Therefore, just because of this sentence from Guhan, the 7 sword-bearers who had already made up their minds to fight with Guhan became hesitant again. To be honest, they really did not want to fight with Guhan. But on second thought, tens of millions of lives were at stake, and they had to fight with Guhan. This was really a dilemma. "Have you guys thought it through? If you don't say anything, I'll leave." Seeing that the scene had fallen into silence, Guhan once again took a step towards the outside of the city. "We cannot fight with you. But we definitely cannot let you leave this place." The great Sun Sword Immortal once again stood in front of Guhan, and the other 6 sword-bearers also walked towards Guhan from all directions. Finally, they surrounded Guhan in a space of less than 1 square meter. These sword-bearers were all covered in a layer of protective walls, physically blocking all avenues of escape for Guhan. Guhan understood what these sword-bearers were thinking. They did not want to break the 1,000-year rule and fight with Guhan directly, but they could not let him go either. Therefore, they could only use the tragic method that the sky guards of the Celestial Empire used to protect their own airspace 1,000 years ago. That was, they did not attack, did not fire cannons, and did not use missiles. Instead, they used the plane itself to force their opponent, and used the most tragic method of collision to defend their country's airspace. However, the spectators on the road did not understand the behavior of these immortal sword-rank sword wielders. They thought that the immortal sword-rank sword wielders would immediately fight with Ji Han. They were already prepared to move their small stools to enjoy this earth-shattering battle that did not require tickets. But these sword-bearers did not fight for a long time. Instead, they used their own bodies to form a cage, trapping Guhan in the air. It looked like they were playing house. This immediately made the crowd unhappy. A portion of them began to make a ruckus on the ground, shouting at the top of their lungs, telling the sword-bearers to hurry up and capture that Guhan. Some people even cursed these sword-bearers for being cowards, for not even having the courage to fight with the people of Yuzhang City. Of course, this was only a portion of the crowd. When some of the more knowledgeable people saw this, they felt a little worried, and felt that something was wrong. But unfortunately, the greatest characteristic of a troll was that as long as they had a mouth, they could spit. And the greatest characteristic of knowledgeable people was that they knew to weigh the pros and cons. They did not want to bring trouble upon themselves, so they chose to remain silent. Why bother? Guhan could not help but sigh as he listened to the waves of curses from the ground. He looked at the sword-bearers with some disappointment, and then pulled out his immortal extinguished sword for the 3rd time. But this time, Guhan was not joking. The blade of the immortal extinguished sword began to shine with sharp sword chi. This was a sign that Guhan had completely entered battle mode. Guhan, are you crazy? Seeing the sword chi on Guhan's immortal extinguished sword, the great sun sword immortal's expression froze. He said furiously, "You were just talking about the rules between sword-bearers. Are you going to break our rules now?" "No. I'm not going to break the rules." Guhan shook his head. "Then why are you releasing the sword chi?" "Oh, you mean that?" Guhan waved the immortal extinguished sword in his hand and smiled. "I'm just cleaning up some annoying people, that's right. In the agreement between Kunzu and all the sword-bearers, it should only be that sword-bearers cannot fight each other." "Guhan, what are you trying to do?" The great sun sword immortal's expression changed. He suddenly had a frightening guess in his mind. "I had some pity for these people, but now it looks like I'll just let them die." Guhan smiled slightly, and the sword chi on the immortal extinguished sword burst forth in an instant. But this sword chi did not attack the sword-bearers of the sword-bearers of the sword-bearers. Instead, it passed through all the sword-bearers of the sword-bearers of the sword-bearers, and landed on the horses instead. The noisy crowd would never have guessed that the immortal sword-wielders would be the ones to land the sword chi on their own heads instead of fighting. In the blink of an eye, the street that was originally filled with tens of thousands of people turned blood red. Countless people didn't even feel any pain before they found their limbs leaving their bodies and falling to the ground. Fresh red blood instantly covered the entire road, and the original asphalt road turned into a blood-red river in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1289. Murder. He really killed someone. After a brief silence, heart-wrenching screams of horror came from the entire avenue. Seeing the blood and severed limbs on the ground, the citizens realized that what was going on in the sky was not a show for them to eat melon seeds and entertain themselves at the same time, but a battle that could take their lives at any time. When they realized this, they started to flee. But when they were about to escape, they were even more alarmed to find that they had nowhere to run. Because the entire street was packed with people, so densely packed that even a mouse couldn't step on them. It was impossible for these audience members to escape from the danger zone in a short period of time. And the crowd in the distance did not know about the battle that was happening in this area. In fact, they were constantly squeezing towards the center, wanting to see the battle in the sky more clearly. When the people inside kept on fleeing, and the people outside kept on squeezing in, a tragedy was bound to happen. The people at the intersection of the two waves of people were the first to be unlucky. They were directly pushed to the ground, and in this situation, once they fell, it meant that there was absolutely no possibility of getting back up, because countless people would instinctively and uncontrollably step over the bodies of those who fell. And some unlucky ones would even be tripped over by those who fell, becoming new carpets and new stones to trip over. All, in a short few seconds, a huge stampede had occurred on the street. More than a few thousand people had fallen to the ground, becoming stepping stones for others. "Guhan, you bastard. Look at what you've done." The great sun sword immortal looked at the tragic sight of the crowd, and asked Guhan in pain. "It's nothing, these people are just too stupid." Guhan laughed. "Everyone, Guhan has gone crazy. He actually attacked ordinary people. We don't need to follow the rules between sword bearers anymore, let's capture him directly," the great sun sword immortal said through gritted teeth. Thanks to Guhan's crazy actions, they already had enough reasons not to follow the rules between sword bearers. Yes. The 6 immortal sword rank sword maidens accepted the order at the same time, and countless sword lights instantly struck Guhan's body. If it was an ordinary immortal sword rank sword bearer, they would probably have been hit so hard that their shields were on the verge of collapse. Chaos sword art, legend of chaos. Guhan roared angrily, and a huge power of the rule erupted from Guhan. The sword ladies of the immortal sword rank swordsmen surrounding Guhan were instantly sent flying by this thick power of the rule, turning into meteors that crashed heavily into the nearby buildings. These buildings were directly caved in. Guhan had single-handedly sent 7 sword ladies of the immortal sword rank flying. Rule force is indeed powerful. Not far away, the 6 immortal sword rank swordbearers exclaimed in horror. They had not expected Guhan's ability to be this terrifying. "Everyone, there is no need to panic. Take a look at your sword maiden's injuries," the great sun sword immortal ordered calmly. The rest of the immortal sword wielders immediately obeyed, and reported back a few seconds later. "No matter. His injuries are not serious. I'm practically uninjured, and still in peak condition." As the voices of the 6 immortal sword rank sword wielders fell, the 7 immortal sword rank sword maidens that had been smashed into the building flew out again. Other than looking a little disheveled, they did not seem to have suffered much damage. "Looks like I guessed right. This Guhan is only a spiritual sword rank swordsman after all. Although he has the power of the rule force, he is still a tier below us. In terms of absolute power, he is still far from us. So he cannot deal too much damage to us. Instead, look at his forehead. There is sweat already. This means that he has already expended a lot of energy. We may not be able to defeat him in a short time, but it is not difficult to hold him back. When his energy is completely exhausted, it will be time for us to capture him," the great sun sword immortal said to the other immortal sword rank swordbearers. These immortal sword rank swordbearers immediately felt that this was very reasonable. After all, this Guhan did not have the ability to travel through the void. As long as they could keep him in Yangjing City, victory would be theirs. But what happened next completely exceeded the expectations of these immortal sword rank swordbearers. When those sword ladies were smashed into the buildings, Guhan, who was flying in the air, actually flung out another 10 sword chi, but these sword chi did not pursue the immortal sword rank sword ladies. Instead, they continued to attack the innocent mortals on the streets. In an instant, the mortals who were scrambling to escape for their lives suffered heavy casualties. Bright red blood sprayed into the sky, dyeing the entire world red. Yangjing City was filled with cries of anguish. "Guhan, you beast, you have really gone mad. These are all innocent humans." Seeing this, the great sun sword immortal, who had just been thinking that he could quickly capture Guhan, was instantly enraged. He wanted to eat Guhan alive. "Great sun sword immortal, I can't be bothered to talk to you. Get these immortal sword rank swordbearers and their sword ladies to stay where they are. Otherwise, even if I am captured by you, at least 10 million people in Yangjing City will die with me." Guhan roared. "Shameless. You scum. Beast." Hearing Guhan's words, The great sun sword immortal was about to explode. You dare to use the lives of humans to threaten us? Do you still have the right to be a human? You bastard, beast, you. The great sun sword immortal's vocabulary was a little lacking. He could not use words that were closer to the truth to express the anger in his heart. He could only keep repeating things like bastard and beast. Ha 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 ha. Hearing the great sun sword immortal's words, Guhan suddenly started to laugh. And he laughed very happily. He laughed so hard that tears flowed from the corners of his eyes. That Jew, you used the lives of tens of millions of people to threaten you, and you wanted to take my life. Now I am using the lives of tens of millions of people to protect my own life. Is there anything wrong with that? That Jew you is Yuan Ku, a beast. Are you going to learn from Yuan Ku and act like a beast? The great sun sword immortal retorted without hesitation. Ha 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 ha. So in order to satisfy a Yuan Ku's request, you are going to kill a future emperor sword wielder, the pillar of humanity? Guhan laughed even louder. In order to satisfy Yuan Ku's desires, you are going to kill your own people. It seems like in your eyes, humans are not even worth a Yuan Ku. You are the real Yuan Ku. We. The great sun sword immortal choked. In a short period of time, he could not even retort. There's no need to continue this nonsense. Guhan waved his hand. Great sun sword immortal, you only have two choices now. 1. To save the tens of millions of lives in the game, and abandon these lives in front of you. 2. Let me go, and let these guys live. When I attacked just now, I held back a little bit of my sword chi. I only cut off their limbs, but not their hearts. In their current state, if you can feed them a nanomachine capsule within an hour, their lives will be saved. But if you and I fight here, the sword chi will not be so easy to control. Everyone here will be turned into minced meat. Chairman, what should we do? Chairman, hurry up and make a decision. When the other immortal sword wielders heard Guhan's threat, none of them dared to continue attacking. Their sword maidens only surrounded Guhan again, but they still maintained a certain distance. They did not dare to attack Guhan again, afraid that they would anger Guhan and kill these struggling humans. You ask me, but who do I ask? The great sun sword immortal was extremely frustrated. All the pressure and decisions were now concentrated on him. If he made a wrong decision, it would be the lives of tens of millions of people. What? Great sun sword immortal, you still haven't given me an answer? Guhan laughed coldly. In a voice so low that everyone present could hear, he urged, I'll only give you 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, if you have not made a decision, I will send out a wave of sword chi. As for which unlucky people will die under my sword chi, I invite you to guess, great sun sword immortal. You. Hearing this, the great sun sword immortal really wanted to vomit blood. As for the citizens, they were scared out of their wits. Regardless of whether they were in perfect health or those who had lost an arm or a leg, they all stopped running. Then for the 3rd time, they knelt on the ground in unison and began to beg for others to save them. But this time, the person they were begging was not Guhan, but the great sun sword immortal. Chairman, let him go. We are innocent. Chairman, I'm about to die, hurry and save me. Don't care about him, let's not care about that Guhan. Saving us is more important. And so, these citizens who had been begging Guhan to stay in exchange for the lives of their loved ones all changed their minds. They begged the great sun sword immortal to quickly let Guhan go, so that they would not continue to suffer. What was worth mentioning was that this time, these citizens had learned their lesson. The hot-tempered among them did not dare to say anything more, such as how the great sun sword immortal was an idiot and did not want to save them. Instead, they lowered their heads and begged, afraid that they would anger the great sun sword immortal like how they had angered Guhan. If that happened, no one would be able to save them. Good move. Respect. Respect. After struggling for a minute, the great sun sword immortal finally put down his hands weakly. His eyes were filled with despair as he waved his hands weakly. Go. Go. Many thanks. Guhan smiled coldly and flew out of the city. This time, no one dared to stop Guhan. 10 minutes later, Guhan had completely disappeared into the wilderness. There was no trace of him. Chapter 1290. Save them. The moment Guhan left, the great sun sword immortal led everyone to save the injured humans. After a few hours of work, they finally cleaned up the ground. After experiencing such a heart-wrenching, or perhaps insane, event, the people of Yangjing City no longer dared to appear on the streets. They all obediently retreated into their homes. The entire street instantly became extremely quiet, like a ghost town. What are the casualties today? Returning to the conference room of the Sword Committee, the great Sun Sword Immortal and all the immortal sword wielders sat together and began to discuss. Reporting, Chairman, there are a total of 108,621 casualties, of which 54,231 have minor injuries, 36,433 have moderate injuries, 16,258 have serious injuries, and 1,699 have died, a staff member in charge of statistics reported. Sigh. This Guhan actually killed almost 1,700 people. This inhumane bastard. The great Sun Sword Immortal slammed his palm on the table angrily, smashing a newly replaced table into pieces. The other immortal sword wielders around him also had expressions of righteous indignation, as if they wanted to cut Guhan into 1,000 pieces. Chairman. The situation might be a little different from what you imagined, the staff member said awkwardly. What's different from what I imagined? The great Sun Sword Immortal asked curiously. Chairman, you'll understand after reading this document. The staff member handed the document to the great Sun Sword Immortal. The great Sun Sword Immortal only took one look, and his eyes popped out, his expression one of extreme disbelief. How could this be? The great Sun Sword Immortal sat on the ground weakly. Chairman, what on earth happened? Seeing the great Sun Sword Immortal's strange reaction, the other sword wielders could not help but ask curiously. All of you, take a look at this document. The great Sun Sword Immortal handed the document to the other immortal sword wielders and passed it around. In the end, everyone's expression was the same as the great Sun Sword Immortal's, an expression of extreme disbelief. Chairman, could there be something fishy here? The quick-witted cold water sword immortal asked. It's not that there won't be anything fishy, there will definitely be something fishy. The great Sun Sword Immortal sighed and rolled his eyes. He immediately jumped up from his seat and shouted, "Meeting adjourned. Today's meeting is adjourned. I still have something important to do. Mr. Xian." This was the casualty report for the day. Tens of thousands of people had died at the hands of that bastard. It seemed like he was determined not to sacrifice himself for humanity. What should we do now? How can we save those tens of millions of lives? Great Sun Sword Immortal asked Xian helplessly in the core control room of the research facility. Sigh. It was time and luck. What can I do? Let's see what Juyu has to say. Xian helplessly threw the report in his hand on the table, then shouted to the air in the control room, "Governor Ju, come out. I know the movements outside can't be hidden from you. Now that things have become like this, why don't you come out and discuss with us?" As expected of Xian, "How do you know I know everything that's happening outside?" As expected, Juyu's figure automatically appeared in the control room as soon as Xian's voice fell. "What's so strange about that? You are Juyu. If you didn't arrange everything properly, you wouldn't have gone all out. Just like how you hacked into our TV system and planted a video that was prepared in advance. I'm guessing you also set up a trap in our various network systems. Even if we cut off the external network of the biological brain, you still have a way to know what's happening in Yangjing. So I'm guessing you know everything that's happening outside. Then you must know why we're here," Xian said calmly. "Smart. You and that Guhan are both smart people," Juyu exclaimed in admiration. "His Majesty the Sovereign of the Sea really exceeded my expectations. I thought he was just an ordinary person with some luck, at most a cow, bound by the world's benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. He would listen to me for the sake of millions of lives. Now it seems I was wrong. He's not cow, but Liu Dier through and through." "Oh, I thought you'd say Guhan was cow. How did he become Liu Bei?" Didn't Liu Bei establish his country with benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom? Didn't he have the perfect time, place, and people? Didn't he follow the morals and morals the most? How could Guhan be Liu Bei? Xian smiled. That's just on the surface. Cao Cao looks like his a lot. He even said he'd rather betray the world than let the world betray him. But in reality, he's still a fool bound by traditional morals. The throne is already within his reach, yet he refuses to proclaim himself emperor. What a joke! Ju Yu said disdainfully. As for that Liu Bei, his mouth is full of morals and morals. But no matter where he goes or who he defers to, he'll betray his master in the end, causing his original master to die. The most unfortunate ones are Liu Jiu and my master. The most unfortunate ones are Liu Jiu and my lord. They agreed to send troops to help Liu Jiu pacify Hanzhong, but in the end, they swallowed the whole of Izhou. They agreed to return Jingju to Jiangdong after conquering Izhou, but in the end, they dominated Jingju and refused to let it go. In the end, they even killed his trusted subordinate, Guan Yu. Such a person is a real treacherous hero, a treacherous hero who doesn't care about benevolence, righteousness, and morality. Unfortunately, he was a little too arrogant in the end. He actually tried to swallow up Jiangdong first and ruined his 1,000-year empire. If it weren't for that bastard Zhuge Kongming who prolonged his life, his Shu Han would have long been gone. Ju Yu explained the nature of the three kingdoms in a few sentences. It was a pity that no one present except Xian truly understood the three kingdoms. Otherwise, they would have found all the flaws in Ju Yu's words. Fine. Let's not talk about this nonsense. Since Governor Ju already knows the situation, then I won't repeat it. Let's change the plan. You can't count on His Majesty Poseidon, Xian said. Is that so? Is it impossible if I insist on taking Guhan's body? Ju Yu's expression changed as he said gloomily. Then there's no other way. You've seen Guhan's capabilities. Even Jendi can't capture him in the wild. Xian shrugged. You doesn't care. You wants his body. Ju Yu replied stubbornly. If you don't hand over Guhan today, then I'll kill 1,000,000 souls, and another 1,000,000 tomorrow, until we all perish together. All right then. Kill him then. Why don't you kill him now? Mother ***, if you have the guts, then kill me. Even if I have to give up the souls of these tens of millions of people, I will chop this stupid brain into pieces. The great Sun Sword Immortal could no longer endure such negotiations. The great Sun Sword Immortal's worries for the lives of tens of millions of people, as well as the grievances he had suffered at Ji Yuhan's hands, were all unleashed at this moment. He waved the immortal sword in his hand like a madman, aiming the blade at the brain of the living being in the center of the room. Silver snake-like sword chi pulsed continuously, clearly ready to strike. Motherfucker, I'm telling you, if you dare harm even one of my souls, I'll destroy your brain and we'll all go our separate ways. The great Sun Sword Immortal's declaration of mutual destruction frightened everyone. The entire room fell silent. No one, including Ju Yu and Chu Xian, dared to say a word. What's the point? You was just joking. In the end, Ju Yu gave in. He smiled awkwardly and said, of course I know how powerful His Majesty is. I also know that he might do something unexpected, so I already have a backup plan, or rather, a target. If you had a backup plan, just say so. There's no need to be so angry. Xian immediately walked to the great Sun Sword Immortal's side after hearing Ju Yu's words. He pacified the enraged great Sun Sword Immortal and put away the sword lady in his hand. He let out a long sigh. Governor Ju, please tell me what the plan is. It's simple. Since Poseidon's body won't do, then give me someone else's body. Her body is barely up to my standard. Ju Yu replied. Whose body do you want? When the great Sun Sword Immortal heard this, he immediately walked to the side of Ju Yu's projection and scolded, I think you shouldn't have any designs on others. Just take my body. I'll give my body to you. Ju Yu shook his head. Great Sun Sword Immortal's righteousness is something I admire. But to put it bluntly, Great Sun Sword Immortal, this is all you can do for the rest of your life. Ascending to the throne is impossible. So I don't want your body. So you want the body of a sword-bearer that can ascend to the throne? The great Sun Sword Immortal was stunned as he said in a daze, but in this world, other than that Jiyu Han, who can guarantee that they can ascend to the throne? No. There's one more, there's another one who is guaranteed to ascend to the throne. Xian replied immediately after the great Sun Sword Immortal finished speaking. You mean? The great Sun Sword Immortal finally reacted. There was indeed a second sword-bearer that could ascend to the throne. But it's too late now. That woman has probably already run off with her master. The great Sun Sword Immortal sat down helplessly. His second target was naturally Lu Shihua. In this world, only Lu Shihua had a 95% chance of becoming an emperor swordbearer. But Guhan and them had caused such a ruckus just now. Lu Shihua could naturally tell that something was wrong. He had most likely escaped from Yangjing City. No. Great Sun Sword Immortal, look, who's that? Xian clapped his hands with a faint smile. A secret door opened, and the struggling Lu Shihua was escorted by an immortal swordbearer to the great Sun Sword Immortal and Ju Yu. Chapter 1291. Yu. Lu Shihua was wearing a rare white dress today. Her fluffy long hair accentuated her beauty. Unfortunately, this beauty was wasted today. Lu Shihua glared at Xian and Sword Immortal Great Sun angrily, as if she wanted to eat them alive. I'm sorry. Pavilion Master Lu Shihua, this is for the lives of millions of people, including the lives of over 10 million people in Yuzhang City. We have no choice but to do this. Sword Immortal Great Sun said shamefully. Lu Shihua snorted and didn't say anything else. Lu Shihua knew that no matter what he said now, it would be useless. It looked like the great Sun Sword Immortal was determined to use his life to exchange for the lives of tens of millions of people. Governor Ju Yu, we've brought the person you wanted. Tell us, what do you want to do next? Sword Immortal Great Sun said impatiently. There's no rush. I need to verify her identity first. Ju Yu smiled. Give me the control of the DNA detector in the research lab. I need to verify her DNA first. If you give me a fake Lu Shihua, it'll be a huge loss for me. Cunning. The great Sun Sword Immortal harumphed coldly, but he had no choice but to agree to the other party's request. He allowed the other party to take control of the detector, and at the same time, he placed Lu Shihua into the detector, allowing the other party to conduct the DNA test. That's right. It's Lu Shihua's DNA data. Ju Yu laughed out loud. However, on second thought, he said, no, you guys still have to get her to release her sword mistress. That's to prove that this is her real body and not a fake one cloned from DNA. Troublesome. Xian frowned, but he had no choice but to comply with Ju Yu's request. He whispered a few words into Lu Shihua's ear. Lu Shihua glared at Sword Immortal Chu Xian angrily, but still obediently demonstrated the process of releasing and returning the Sword Maiden. The angel with 8 wings proved that she was the real Lu Shihua. Now, there were no more problems with Lu Shihua's identity. Ju Yu was very satisfied with this result. He quickly said, connect me to the internet and put on the gaming helmet. That's enough. Let's do as Ju Yu says. The great Sun Sword Immortal ordered. Immediately, someone tied Lu Shihua to a chair and placed the gaming helmet on his head. Then, Lu Shihua's mind went into a trance and he entered the game. Alright, Governor Ju Yu, this body is yours. You can come in, the great Sun Sword Immortal said with a livid face. Thank you. The great Sun Sword Immortal. We will be comrades in arms from now on. Ju Yu laughed heartily and the projection disappeared in an instant. Following that, the brain of the creature that was originally still and uncomprehending began to tremble violently. The researcher who was monitoring the situation and data of the entire creature's brain said excitedly, a large amount of strange data that cannot be compiled is moving through the network. Take off Lu Shihua's helmet right now. The great Sun Sword Immortal's expression changed, and he immediately gave the order. Hence, someone immediately took off the helmet, and Lu Shihua forcibly broke free from the game. Great Sun Sword Immortal, what are you doing? Have you forgotten our promise? More than a minute later, a furious Ju Yu appeared through the projection. He questioned the great sun sword immortal with a crazed expression. I haven't forgotten. It's just that I don't trust you. The great sun sword immortal snorted coldly. How do I know that you won't destroy all the souls in the creature's brain after obtaining Lu Shihua's body? You must first release half of the souls in the creature's brain before I can hand Lu Shihua's body over to you. There's no need to worry, Ju Yu said in a clear voice. As long as I enter Lu Shihua's body, my life will be in your hands. If I still dare to not let these human souls go, you can kill me. At that time, I'll really be dead. Governor Ju, we are all smart people. There's no need to play games. This is just your side of the story. Xian waved his hand. You keep saying that you want to join us humans, but how do I know that you are sincere? After all, we humans did wrong you in the beginning, inflicting unimaginable torture and humiliation on you. I feel that your desire to destroy the entire human race is much greater than your desire to join us. If I were you, I would make the same request as you. However, when I obtain Lu Shihua's body, I will destroy all the human souls in one go. As for whether the humans will kill Lu Shihua's body, I don't care. This way, not only will humanity lose tens of millions of souls, they will also lose a swordsman who can ascend to the throne. Not to mention that Lu Shihua has a master like Ji Yu Han. He will definitely not let go of the person who harmed his disciple. Who knows, there might be a large-scale civil war between the human swordsmen. This kind of revenge is the cruelest revenge to the human race. At that time, the entire human race might be destroyed by my own schemes. Even if I really die, it will be a worthy death. Destroying the human race with one's own strength. Isn't this glory and merit even more glorious than defeating Zhuge Kongming? After all, Zhuge Kongming fought for 1,000 years and never destroyed us humans. To be able to do what Zhuge Kongming couldn't do, this is probably the best way for you to defeat Zhuge Kongming. You. Ju Yu's face stiffened. Xian had obviously hit the nail on Ju Yu's head. To Ju Yu, destroying the tens of millions of souls in the brain after obtaining Lu Shihua's body was indeed the best way for Ju Yu to take revenge. Ha ha ha. Chu Xian, you are indeed amazing. I thought I could deceive the world, but you still saw through me. Ju Yu's expression returned to normal after the stiffening. He then laughed loudly. That's right, this is my plan. I didn't expect you to find out in the end. If so, then let these tens of millions of human souls be buried with Ju Yu. Ju Yu can be considered to have avenged the hundreds of years of hatred. Wait. Xian stood in front of Ju Yu and stopped him. You only control tens of millions of human souls in the brain. Even if you kill all these souls, it's just a few strands of hair to us humans. As long as we use advanced biotechnology, tens of millions of human souls can be recovered in 10 years. This won't hurt us humans, do you understand? Don't try to trick me, Xian. These tens of millions of human souls may not be important to you, but don't forget, there are over 10,000 swordsman souls trapped in the game. There's even the soul of a sword saint-level swordsman. If these swordsman souls die, it'll be enough to hurt you humans. Ju Yu said through gritted teeth. It's just 10,000 swordsman souls. We humans have over 200,000 swordsman souls. Losing 10,000 isn't a big deal. As for that divine sword tier sword wielder, he is already 76 years old this year. He can fight for another 10 years at most. If such a divine sword tier sword wielder dies, then so be it. We humans can bear the loss. At most, the next few years will be tough, but as long as we wait for another 10 years, we humans will be able to recover completely. Your mutual destruction is just another 10 years for us humans to hide in the base city. Don't you think you're being too arrogant if you think you can destroy us humans like this? You. Ju Yu's expression changed again. He didn't think his pair of trump cards would become 1 against 3 with just a few words from Xian. It was as if killing millions of people wasn't a big deal at all. But Ju Yu was Ju Yu. After a brief moment of confusion, he quickly calmed down. His expression changed a few times before he finally calmed down. He sneered, I was almost fooled by you. If you humans really don't care about the souls in the brain, then why did you have to fall out with Guhan? Why did you have to help me capture Lu Shihua? Don't you know this means completely falling out with the strongest person in the future, Poseidon? Aren't you afraid that Guhan will take revenge on Yangjing City after he becomes the emperor? When that time comes, Yangjing City will really be finished. No one in Yangjing City is a match for Guhan. The dimensional barrier you used to defend against Yuan Ku will be completely useless against a human like Guhan. All of you will die under Guhan's sword, Ju Yu said crazily. It was as if he could already see the scene of Guhan slaughtering the entire Yangjing City. Sigh. We didn't understand this from the start. We only understood it after Guhan left. Xian and Great Sun Sword Immortal said bitterly. At that time, we were too worried about the lives of tens of millions of people. We didn't carefully evaluate whether the lives of tens of millions of people were worth the life of Poseidon. We didn't expect Guhan's temper to be so violent. Not only did none of the tens of millions of people on the streets submit to Guhan, they instead ignited his anger, resulting in the current situation. Now that I think about it, the three of us should sit down and have a good talk. 2 heads are better than 1. If the three of us had a good talk, I'm afraid we would have exposed your true colors long ago, and we wouldn't have fallen into such an embarrassing situation, Xian said with a sigh. As soon as Xian finished, everyone including Great Sun Sword Immortal was filled with unwillingness and regret. They regretted that Yangjing City had fallen out with Guhan so rashly. Indeed, if both sides had calmed down and had a good talk, the ending would have been completely different. If that's the case, why did you still capture Lu Shihua? Wouldn't that ruin your relationship with Ji Yu Han even more? Ju Yu retorted. Even if we didn't capture Lu Shihua, it wouldn't help. Guhan and Yangjing City are already enemies. No one can change that. If Lu Shihua returns to Guhan's side, Guhan will have the power of 2 Emperor Sword level swordbearers. Yangjing City will probably be suppressed by Guhan forever. We won't be able to live either. Instead of that, why don't we turn Guhan's 2 Emperor Sword level swordbearers into 1 Emperor Sword level swordbearers each? That's the only chance of survival for Yangjing City, Xian said seriously. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.